Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to our viewers around the world. Wherever you are, I hope you are staying safe, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Professor Hal Kaufman, and I will be the moderator for this conference. On behalf of the Department of Technology Management and Innovation, the NYU Tandon School of Engineering, I wish to welcome you to our 12th annual conference on human capital innovation in technology and analytics. The theme this year is the future of remote work, insights from analytics. In today's presentations, analytics will not only be utilized to understand more about the impact of remote work on workers as well as their firms, but also to identify effective telework interventions that organizations are using to improve the retention and attraction of talent. It is now my sincere pleasure to introduce Professor Nasir Memon, the Vice Dean for Students and Academic Affairs at NYU Tandon School of Engineering, for some welcoming remarks on behalf of NYU Tandon. And Professor Memon is actually talking to us via recording from Abu Dhabi. Professor Memon, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone, or good evening or good afternoon, whatever the situation might be for you. For myself, it is good evening, actually. It's unfortunate that I could not be here live to welcome you to the event, but I happen to be on sabbatical this year, as you can see from my Hawaiian shirt. No, I'm not in Hawaii. I'm in New York University's Abu Dhabi campus, as you can see behind. It's virtual, not real, but that's what the campus really looks like. And so given the time difference, we thought that it was better that I simply recorded my welcome remarks. I've seen, and I'm grateful that Hal has given me the opportunity to do so. I've seen him run this conference on human capital innovation in technology and analytics for more than a decade now. Both me and Hal go a long way back, and I've always admired the way he ran it and the high quality of the talks and the people that attended. And in some sense, I'm grateful that he sort of tapped me and said, Nasir, would you please do the introductions? And I'm happy that I'm able to do so, but unfortunately not in real time, right? So welcome, everyone. I'm sure you'll have a great workshop, conference, and I understand that this has been held in person in Brooklyn for a long time, all the time when I was seeing it. But the last couple of years disrupted that, and this year, again, we are holding it in a virtual format. So it's unfortunate that you were not able to come and visit Brooklyn. As many of you know, if you live in New York, you think you are the center of the universe. And if you live in Brooklyn, then you think that you're in the center of New York City. And so we are sort of the core, the center of the universe. And if you're at Tandon, you're right bang in downtown Brooklyn, the center of everything, right? And if you haven't visited Brooklyn for many years, I welcome you to come and visit. It has changed tremendously in the past 2 decades. It's become sort of a place which is live with energy and creativity. And at the very heart of all this is, of course, the engineering school of NYU, the Tandon School of Engineering, which is participating, contributing, and driving some of this growth that is taking place. In fact, as some of you may have heard, that NYU has recently announced that it will invest $1 billion, billion with a B, right, in the engineering school in Brooklyn over the next few years. So we are really poised to take this momentum forward, and there are much better things to come yet. So if you are around, I welcome you to visit NYU Tandon. If you do visit New York City or Brooklyn, reach out to me and I'll be happy to take you around, give you a tour of campus, maybe even tell you where the best pizza places in Brooklyn are. So if you're welcome, please try and make it to Brooklyn if you can. So that's unfortunate that you're not able to make it to Brooklyn this year, but at the same time, I think it's fortunate that we are holding this event live virtually, because first of all, it gave me an opportunity to welcome all of you, although I'm not here, not in Brooklyn right now. And secondly, it allowed Hal to really put together a great sort of set of distinguished guests and speakers, and draw a very large audience, more than 400, I'm told, from all around the world. And the topic of the conference this year is also so very suitable to this whole business of in-person virtual. The topic has to do with remote work and the insights from analytics we have obtained over the last few years, and that might give us an understanding of where we are headed as far as remote work goes. This topic is of interest to me as well, although I'm not somebody who sort of looks at, studies human organization behavior. But over the last 5 years or so, 6 years, I think, I've been running the online education at NYU Tandon. In the last 6-7 years, we've grown it by a factor of 10, right? And as I've been doing it, I've been sort of convinced that there is a way to do education better, right, by doing it remotely or in a hybrid manner. We're just, to be very candid, not there yet. We're getting there. We are understanding how to like deliver high quality, meaningful learning experiences remotely. And the advantages it offers, if you can do that well, are tremendous, right? Just scale, you can reach out to people from all over the world, the flexibility that students get, right, in choosing the time and place of their learning styles, their flexibility they get in all kinds of pedagogical techniques that were very hard for us to do on campus, like repetition learning, active learning, adaptive learning, things of that sort. And so all those can be done much more effectively when done in a remote format. But still, we're not there yet. I don't know exactly what is missing, and I think it can actually get really better. And I wish I had been there. I guess the same situation occurs with work. More and more work is being done remotely, and tremendous benefits of remote work are being realized by companies and individual employees all over the world. But perhaps there are ways that industry has already delivered that we could learn from in higher ed of engaging and making people work together, collaborate, learn from each other better. And I definitely be watching the recordings of the event. I unfortunately cannot attend live because of the time zone difference, but I wish you a great conference. I'm sure it'll be exciting, and And I'm sure Hal, as usual, has done and will do a tremendous job. So thank you very much and welcome again. Bye.
Thank you, Professor Memon, for your welcoming remarks. And I hope that some of you will be able to take you up on your offer of giving a tour of downtown Brooklyn, which is a magnificent place if you've never been there before. And part of that magnificence has much to do with our campus, the influence of our campus. Despite people suffering from Zoom overload, I'm very pleased to report that we have a registration this year of almost 400 people who are situated throughout the United States and around the world in at least 10 countries on 4 continents. About 4 out of 5 registrants come from industry, including many well-known firms, and comprise executives, managers, and professionals, with the latter in a variety of roles, ranging from machine learning and data analytics experts to various HR specialists and engineers. About 1 in 5 come from the academic community, including faculty and students from NYU, as well as other institutions. The diverse academic fields represented in our audience reflect the multidisciplinary nature of today's program, with thought leaders who come from fields that range from data analytics to industrial organizational psychology. Next slide, please. Before we get to today's theme, the future of remote work, insights from analytics, I would like to provide a brief look at the hot button themes of past conferences, which have been held annually for the first 8 years at our Metro Tech campus in Brooklyn and virtually via Zoom for the last 3 years. These conferences began in 2012, looking broadly at how technology was impacting human capital management. In the following years, we focused on specific hot button themes that included talent management, engagement and performance, diversity and inclusion, and the use of games and gamification. In recent years, our research at NYU drove the themes, beginning with a focus on career paths that evolved into the future of work and the role of AI. The most recent conferences examined the post-COVID workforce, including the phenomenon of the Great Resignation, which is connected directly with this year's theme of remote work. A common denominator in these conferences was the application of people analytics to win the war for talent in the workplace. And links to videos of some of these conferences have been posted on the current website. Next slide. That's okay, we're there, okay. The conference routes are very much connected to our evolving academic program, which focuses on the management of technology, organizations, people, and data analytics. Today, the Department of Technology Management and Innovation offers online courses as part of its Management of Technology MS degree program that includes a people analytics track. As you can see from the slide, these online courses cover a variety of subjects related to people analytics and HR technology. Faculty include noted specialists in the field who are veteran consultants and people analytics experts. For example, the introduction course in human resource management and systems is taught by a prominent HRIS guru, human resource information systems, for those who need to know what that means. More general data analytics courses are also offered in this MS program. For those interested in these courses, the application deadlines for fall 2023 are July 1st for the part-time online MS degree and August 24th for visiting students who can take individual online part-time, can take individual online courses that may be used toward a degree. For more information, you can write to the Department of Technology Management and Innovation at tmi@nyu.edu. Let's turn briefly to an overview of today's conference. As you can see from the topics in the slide, the presentations will explore how data analytics can help understand what is happening in the emerging remote work environment and its impact on talent management. The conference board will share data that explores the recent evolution of remote work and the complexity of work location from both the employer and employee perspectives. Accenture and Microsoft will enlighten us with the innovative data-driven methods being utilized to provide insight into managing talent to thrive in the post-COVID remote work environment. ROI Institute will demonstrate the impact and ROI of remote work and provide insights that can help in deciding whether to invest in telework. New York University researchers will apply analytics to remote job ads for determining future trends in telework. The individual presentations will be followed by an open discussion among the panel members, which will include a Q&A session with all the speakers. I encourage you to stay for that session, since it is the best part of the program, in my opinion, and gives you an opportunity to interact with the presenters. At this time, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to our industry co-sponsors, the ROI Institute. It is ROI Institute's debut with us this year as a presenter as well as a sponsor. And a warm welcome to Dr. Patty Phillips, the CEO of ROI Institute. For the very first year, this conference has been co-sponsored by the award-winning Tech SHRM student chapter of the Society for Human Resource Management at NYU Tandon School of Engineering. Tech SHRM provided much of the technical support for the conference today. Many thanks to the Tech SHRM team, who we will be hearing more about later. We also want to thank our professional society co-sponsor, IREM, the International Association of Human Resource Information Management, which has also been with us for the very first conference. Much appreciation to IREM for being with us for 12 years. And approving 5.5 recertification credit hours for attendance at this conference applied to their HRBI certification, that's Human Resource Information Professional. To verify your participation for credit hours, please contact us directly via email in your conference confirmation, which is also on the slide, which is Tandon, SHRM@nyu.edu. Things to know before we start. There's a conference program that has today's schedule, speaker bios, and abstracts. You can go to the link on the slide, which is also in your invitation email, or just use the QR code on the slide. To maximize the time for our speakers, my introductions will be brief. Instead, I refer you to our speakers' bios and abstracts in the conference program. Regarding Q&A, direct your questions to the Q&A box, as the chat box will be disabled throughout the conference. Your questions can be general or directed to specific speakers. To the extent possible, questions will be answered in the Q&A box or during the panel discussion at the end of the day, which is a highlight of the conference, and I again encourage you to stay for that special part of the conference. Let me conclude by expressing my hope that you will leave here at the end of the conference enriched and a bit wiser about our theme for this year, the future of remote work, insights from analytics. The lead-off speaker today is for the conference board, which has a long history with today's event that goes back to 2014, when our keynote speaker was Dr. Rebecca Ray, the Executive Vice President, Human Capital at the Conference Board. This year, I'm very pleased to have that change continue with Dr. Robin Erickson, Vice President, Human Capital at the Conference Board, who also had presented last year. Dr. Erickson brings us some very interesting research results in her presentation. The pendulum is swinging back, but how far? Remote work post-COVID. Robin, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kaufman. And let me just share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
Sure.
perfectly.
Very good, perfect.
Okay, great. Well, it's my pleasure to be here again. Thank you so much for having me. And before I did speak last year, before that, it was Dr. Amy Abel, also at the conference board. We are still under the leadership of Dr. Rebecca Ray. So very excited to be with you again. Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Kaufman. The only thing that I would add is that not only that I started my career in management consulting. I then took a detour. I got a Ph.D. Specifically looking at the engagement and retention of downsizing survivors. And then I went back into consulting, and then I became a research analyst about 10 years. So I think I come at some of these topics in a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of folks, because I've seen how many of these concepts are applied in organizations, as well as then actually writing about them. And so I'm thrilled to share with you some of the research that we've been doing here at the conference board. So when I heard that the focus of this year's conference was around remote work, I was at the same time concerned and excited. One, we've been doing a lot of research on remote work, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But the other thing is that last year I shared results from the Reimagined Workplace, a survey series I'm also going to tell you about. And we're actually launching that survey today. So the work that I'm going to be sharing with you comes from many different places. In fact, so the Reimagined Workplace is the previous surveys that we've done are over on the left. The conference board was one of the first organizations to have a survey in the field looking at how organizations were measuring the effects of COVID-19 on employees. I don't know if you remember this, but it will be indelibly printed on my mind. But March 6th, 2020 was the last. I was in New York, and that was the day the mayor of New York declared a state of emergency. And so I flew back to Chicago, where I live, and started quarantining long before most people in Chicago did. But our first survey in the field was in April, and our first report was published in May of 2020, and we are now publishing. We're now surveying and then publishing HR leaders annually. So we also, in October 2020, started surveying employees, and then releasing press releases with the survey results. And so you can see there some of the more recent press results that we've done. So we have, as you can see, plenty of content for me to go ahead and share with you today. I wanted to start this whole conference today with a little bit of a reminder about everything and what's been happening the last 3 years. Remote work didn't start 3 years ago. In fact, there were people working remotely ever since people were able to take their computers home and do work there. In fact, I would say ever since people could take any work home and do it, but it became more prevalent when people could use their computers and connect to, first of all, we connected with hardwired and then Wi-Fi. But in our first Reimagined Workplace survey, we asked what % of your US full-time employees are currently working primarily virtually remotely, at least 3 days a week. And the responses here are those saying that 40% or more of their employees were working remotely. So you can see that number was very low prior to March of 2020 with only 6%. Then there's the March 6th date, where I think the realization of how big of an issue the global pandemic was going to become started hitting our global consciences here in the US at least. In April of 2020, the CDC recommended that there was a mask mandate in public. And by May of 2020, the US employment rate hit 14.7%. Remember all the layoffs that occurred, especially in the hospitality and the airlines industries when travel came to a complete stop with all of the lockdowns that were happening. By December, we had an approved vaccine, an FDA approved vaccine that was made available to healthcare workers. And that was a really big step for us. That's pretty fast, actually, to have gotten a vaccine that fast. And then by March of 2021, when we did our next Reimagined Workplace survey, more than 100 million COVID-19 vaccine doses had been administered in the US. And you can see there, so what the line is tracking, it went from less than 6% working remotely, 40 organizations who had 40% or more of their employees working remotely, it shot up to 75%. A year later, it had gone down to 72%. 2 years later, in March or April of 2022, that number had gone down to 55%. So just to sort of put some more things in context, the spring of 2021, in a year, we went from having the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression to the Great Resignation, where organizations were having a very, very hard time finding employees, both those with professional services organizations for knowledge workers and those organizations who were looking for hourly workers. December 2021, the FDA approved a pill to treat COVID-19 symptoms. However, it wasn't widely available. So again, I'm quite certain that in many people would say that the fact that these things were happening so quickly were miracles in and of themselves. But I just wanted us to sort of have like the complete timeline. In February of 2022, the next Black Swan event happened, which was Russia invading Ukraine. And then by May of 2022, 1 million Americans had died from COVID. And then in summer 2022, so last summer, there was the threat of the global economic slowdown. And then what's coming up in May of this year is that the national emergency and public health emergency for COVID-19 will end. And so I'm not 100% sure if that means it will then be an endemic and not a pandemic, but everyone often talks about the end of COVID-19 or the end of the pandemic. And technically, as of today, we still have a pandemic. So I just wanted to sort of give everyone the context, but I also wanted to sort of show you that there's a little bit of a pendulum, right? The pendulum of remote work, which went from 6% prior to March of 2020 up to 75%. Didn't come down much for the first year after the pandemic began, started to come down in March or April of 2022. And now we're curious about what will the results of our survey be? And again, we did just launch that survey today, so you'll have to stay tuned to see just how far that number will go. If it goes, it might stay the same. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit more about our survey research. So this is research that we asked the same question: what % of your US full-time employees do you expect will be working primarily virtually remotely at least 3 days a week, 1 year after COVID-19 subsides? So in March of 2020, the number was pretty low. 19% of the organizations said that they expected that a year after COVID-19 subsided, 40% or more of their staff would be working remotely. That number doubled, though, by March of 2021, went much higher. And it even continued to go up by March of 2022. So again, the jury is really out in terms of what will happen 3 years after that pandemic began. Little bit more information. This data is from April of 2022. So this was our Reimagined Workplace 2 years later. We asked, same question, what % of your US full-time employees work primarily virtually remotely prior to COVID? And there you can actually see all of the different categories we asked about. Less than 10% of your employees, 10 to less than 20%, 20% to less than 40 or 40% or more. So for right now, just look at the yellow boxes, okay? Yellow boxes was 40% or more. And you can see that for most of those industries, there was a little yellow, but it was just over 11% for the very lowest one, which was business, finance, and related professional services. All the rest were less than 10%, saying that 40% or more of their staff were working virtually. So then if we give you the data then from, we asked this question again, saying, what % of your employees do you expect will work primarily virtually remotely a year after the COVID-19 pandemic completely subsides? Look at that huge amount of yellow. And if we go back up here, notice there's no yellow right in the middle of the chart with construction, energy, utilities, transportation, and manufacturing. And now look, there is yellow in those two industries specifically, and the other bars are much, much bigger. So there's definitely been a sense that there will be more remote work. And so I'm thrilled that this conference is looking at this, because I think we're still learning how to do this. And we're doing it with our employees. So this data came from April of 2022, and then the data here that I'm showing you came from October of 2022, when we asked employees, where 55% of them were working a hybrid schedule, and only 14% were fully on site. And at that point, 31% were 100% remote still. That was a year ago. Sorry, this was in October, right? Not a year ago. This data was from October of 2022, so just 6 months ago. And there's definitely a lot of people who are working hybrid schedules. And we're also saw with the Great Resignation that employees are still looking for that flexibility. So if you see here, so we saw the pendulum shift to remote work, but it's beginning to swing back to on-site. How do we know that? Well, just like you guys, we're seeing headlines, right? In February, Amazon said that they were updating their plans to return to the office in February of 2023. In March, the CEO of Disney said that any Disney staff member working in a hybrid fashion would need to return to Disney's offices 4 days a week. And then last year in August, JP Morgan asked half of its employees to return to the office 5 days a week, and another 40% to go in a few days a week. And they're collecting data and including tracking attendance. And I've actually been hearing that. I heard from a friend last week at a consulting firm where they are tracking attendance on site. And those employees that don't go in an average of 2 days a week, they are actually going to have lower bonuses. They've been told that their bonuses will be affected. And you can see that actually a year ago, the vaccinated Citigroup employees were asked to return to the office for at least 2 days a week. So, and there are headlines coming out all the time. This is just a few that we're seeing. But we know that as of late 2022, this again is October 2022, employees were still looking for work location flexibility. So we asked, if you left your organization or intend to leave in the next 6 months, what most influenced or influences your decision? Well, better pay and career advancement for many years have been the top 2 reasons why people might switch positions. So that's not a big surprise. And actually during COVID, we actually saw the desire for flexibility to actually go up underneath better pay. It's moved down slightly now. So, we've seen shifts as we've asked this question over time, but you can see that 16% said that the ability to work from anywhere was very important to them. And 9% said that they were looking for a flexible work schedule policy in terms of hours. So another piece of data that we found that we thought was interesting was that more than half of workers would take a pay cut of 5% or more for flexibility. So on the left-hand side, 55% of workers said they take a pay cut of 5% or more to have flexible working hours. And 24% said that they would take a pay cut of 10% or more. On the right-hand side, you can see for flexible working location, 52% of workers, so almost the same number, said they would take a pay cut of 5% or more to have flexibility in the working location. And again, very similar number on far right, 23% said they would take a pay cut of 10% or more in order to be able to have flexible working location. So we just finished a big report here at the conference board about Gen Z. Might be of interest to a lot of you, but there was 5 imperatives that we found that Gen Zers are looking for. And the first was around compensation. The second was around looking for more control. And so, well, what did that mean? Well, in our survey, we spoke to both knowledge workers and hourly Gen Z employers, Gen Zers working in full-time positions, over 100 of them. And you can see that this was very important to them. For knowledge workers, it meant the opportunity to work remotely, part or full-time. Many of the Gen Zers finished their schooling. So we used as our cutoff for Gen Z is those employees born in 1997 or later. So that makes the oldest Gen Z employee working today 26, right? Just turning 26. And many of them finished their education remotely under lockdowns. And they think that remote and hybrid is normal for them and that they can work just as well remotely. And even for those hourly workers, they're looking for flexibility because they want to know what shifts they have and know their schedules in advance so they can plan for personal commitments. So, our suggestion to employers was to best attract, engage, and retain Gen Zers, give them as much control as possible over where and when they work. So what are the implications of flexibility and the hybrid work model? Well, many companies are offering innovative solutions. About a year ago, Airbnb decided they would balance remote work and in-person connection. They believe that their employees can work remotely, live anywhere, and come into the office, in-person activities and social events about a week every quarter. That's the model that they adopted. Well, Walmart actually reinvented its complete scheduling system. Now, Walmart is one of the largest employers in the US. And in order to give their associates more consistency and flexibility, they created an app that allows associates to view their schedules, to swap shifts, and pick up unfilled shifts. And that's one of the biggest challenges with hourly workers, which is because there's so many labor shortages that many of them are being required to work additional shifts. So they don't really know when they can be available or make commitments. And so I've heard some really great things about this new scheduling system at Walmart. And I think it's really an example. Another example that I'll just put out there is that Marriott, before the pandemic even, created sort of an Uber-like app for their housekeepers, where they basically said, whatever hours you can work, we'll let you come and be a housekeeper for a certain set of hotels in a certain city. And so that's really creative. And I think the sky's the limit in terms of what other organizations will do as they try to find flexibility. The other thing is that, our most recent survey that was published in February this year for employees, they said that we asked the question, which of the following working conditions or policies do you believe would be helpful in supporting employees? And the respondents could select their top 5. And you can see there that being able to take no work PTO days without guilt, 55% had that as one of their top solutions. That a flexible or a hybrid work schedule is very important. The work from home anywhere option, very important as well, 48%, almost 50%. Training managers to promote a healthy work-life balance, very important. Providing boundaries for communication after hours to help employees disconnect. And the reason why is because with this little gadget right here, see, people can work 24/7, right? Anywhere, from anywhere. So I think it's really important for organizations to understand that while flexibility is what employees are looking for, they need to provide boundaries as well. So just thought I would end here with a few questions for leaders to ask their employees, because I think that the answers to these questions will vary by industry and organization, but ask your employees, what's the ideal mix of remote, hybrid, on-site? And then what should employees be doing while they're remote? And what do you think employees should be working on when they're on site? give you an example for me. I'm the Vice President of Human Capital Research here, which means I spend a lot of time trying to do research and a lot of time managing the team. I believe that I need to be doing research when I am remote, and that when I'm on site, I need to be spending all my time in meetings. So that's what I try to do just for myself. You can also ask your employees, what do you need to do to be successful remotely? What do the employees need to be successful on site? What concerns do they have about being remote? What concerns do they have about being on site? And also ask the questions about how's your mental health and your well-being? Are you burned out? I think there's a lot of people who are still burned out after the turbulence of the last 3 years, which were completely unprecedented. Many, many things that have happened all at one time, starting with the pandemic and many of the other events that are happening. And now we're looking at the recession. You can ask your employees, how engaged are you, or are you looking for a new job? And so I just wanted to end with, well, how far do you think the remote pendulum might swing? I don't have an answer for you, but I think that the remainder of today's sessions will address some of this and provide suggestions, other suggestions for how organizations can address this today. So, and just one last thing, I just wanted to provide, as these slides will be available to you all, just a few of the resources from the conference board that you can use. And you can see there, we've got a survey in the field right now, workers wanting more flexibility. That's the working title. It might have a different one to come out in May 2023. And then the Reimagined Workplace 2023 that should be published in June or July. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Kaufman.
Thank you so much, Robin, for that wonderful background and provided a better understanding of what's happening in the, I would call it the post-COVID remote work environment, because I think we're just about there. And I look forward to future research that you guys are doing to follow up to see which way the pendulum actually goes.
I think it'll be interesting. So thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure to have you. And we look forward to having you at our Q&A session to get more insights. Okay, thank you again. Well, we now turn to another presenter. I'm very pleased to welcome Microsoft as a participant for the second time at this conference. The speaker will be Maria Paracha, Senior HR Data Analyst, HR Business Insights, and her research focuses on Microsoft insights from data-driven approach to flexible work. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If it's okay, I will share my screen to present. Okay. Hal, can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more is the mission of Microsoft. I'm Maria Paracha. I'm a senior data analyst, as Hal already shared, in the HR Business Insights group at Microsoft. Thank you to all who have joined this session today and giving me the chance to speak. And I'm super excited for this opportunity. One of the focus areas of my role is to support the hybrid work program team at Microsoft, which has been leading the efforts of flexible work at the company, hence my presence here today. Now, I would love to share a little bit about HR Business Insights, or HRBI, to get everyone grounded, starting from our vision, which is to enable HR and the business to leverage data and insights to ensure our employees thrive and Microsoft succeeds. And our org exists to empower HR and the business to make more impactful people and culture decisions using data and insights. If you look at the top right corner of our slide, you'll see a hashtag data-driven HR, and that is our condensed version of our mission, which we use in all of our work, including any publications that go out from our team. Now, let me share a brief example of how we activate our mission. So HRBI partners with the new employee orientation team to help improve the onboarding process of new employees through a pilot program involving onboarding buddies. And onboarding buddies are dedicated current employees assigned to help a new hires transition. Now, we learned that these buddies help ensure a successful onboarding in 3 key ways: provide organizational context, boost productivity, and improve new employee satisfaction. So the onboarding buddy is a practice that was then adopted company-wide and has been a key part of successful onboarding of our employees. So this study was published in the Harvard Business Review in 2019 by our org leader, Don Klinghoffer. So we generally take the insights, and our insights are very much business driven by our HR team. And then those are generally shared with broader Microsoft to help enable them within the company. Now, I'll share a little bit about how our org is currently structured to achieve our goals. And the reason why I'm emphasizing on the current piece is because what we found over many years is that it's extremely important to align our structure in our agile way to ensure we're delivering the impact to our leaders and our employees and overall company. So I'm sharing this because this is not how HRBI was structured, in case anyone has already seen our structure before, and certainly not many years back. We are organized in 4 different groups: Advanced Analytics and Research Team, AART, COE Analytics Team, and COE stands for Center of Excellence. That's the team that I sit in, and Analytics and Scale and Line Analytics Team. Now, our team, the COE Analytics team, is a team of data analysts that is aligned to support our COEs. And COEs are diversity and inclusion group, hybrid program teams, talent acquisition, and more. And now, if you talk a little bit about how do the teams interact. So I'm aligned to flexible work at Microsoft team in HR. Once I receive an analytics request, if I have the data currently readily available and the models are created, I would look at the business actions, complete the analysis, and share the insights with the program team, who then takes actions on data. However, if data is not easily available, or we have to work with personnel level survey data, I partner closely with our advanced analytics and research team, which consists of data scientists, research, and industry IO-psych experts. So the analyst at scale team then basically takes all the work that we have done. If it needs to be scaled or monitored at a continuous point, then they help us span connection points and scale it across the company. And the line analytics team works very similarly to our team, which is the COE analytics team, but is aligned to our business leaders and our HR business partners. We do have one data privacy team member, and CELA, which is a team of our lawyers who we work together very consecutively, because data privacy of our internal employees is very key and crucial. Now, here I am sharing few skills and experiences that make up our broader org, including, HR, finance, consulting, IO-psych, statistics. And as you can see, we have employees with diverse skills and experiences, and that makes the conversation and perspectives a lot richer. Now, to help execute on our mission to empower the people who empower the planet, we listen to our employees via our employee listening system that drives continuous progress in making Microsoft an exceptional place to work and an evolving culture with a growth mindset. Our employee listening system consists of active and ambient components. And if I can get your attention to the left side of the slide, this slide consists of our active listening system, which includes employee signal survey, our daily signal survey, and 3 employee life cycle surveys capturing sentiments on 3 of our key moments that matter, including onboarding, exit, and internal mobility. And the tenets of our active listening system include engage employees, empower our managers, enlighten our leaders to help make decisions, enable HR and operational excellence. Now, if you look on the right side, those are our ambient listening system, which consists of social listening, what inquiries employees are submitting, and Viva Insights. Now, I would like to call 2 of our resources of listening that have been instrumental in providing rich insights on the perceptions of our employee population during COVID-19. So first one is Daily Signals, previously called Daily Pulse, in case you hear me use both names. When COVID hit, we quickly added few questions into Daily Signals, which is a sample survey to understand if our employees were getting the information they needed from leadership. Once we moved into the recovery phase, we pivoted our questions to focus on employee perception of hybrid or flexible operating model, productivity, work-life balance, prioritization support, and team connectedness. So we also ask specific questions to our managers to make sure we're addressing their concerns and providing them with the right level of support. Now, our second source that has been instrumental is Microsoft Viva Insight, which is on the Ambient side on the top right corner. And what is Viva Insights? So Viva Insights provides insights into two of the most important factors in personal activity. So we have deployed a company-wide My Analytics solution to help our employees understand their own work patterns, how much time they're spending in meetings, answering emails, and how much time do they spend working after hours, focusing on their most urgent and important work. And this is all to help them empower, make improvements that matter. Now, it's also important to note that the dashboards and the information contained in them are completely confidential. So the employee is the only person with access to this dashboard and its data, not the manager, not HR, nobody else, and only employee. So what this does is empowers them on their decision-making. And our ultimate goal is creating the ability for employees to own their own data and improve the efficiency and their work-life balance. Now, additionally, the last 2 to 3 years have drastically changed the way employees think about their role of their work and career in their lives. So more than ever, employees are aspiring to live their lives more meaningfully. We switched our annual survey, which was MS Poll, to Employee Signals, which is an employee experience survey. And the purpose of Employee Signals is to measure the employee's ability to thrive at Microsoft. So individual items under Thrive measure employee empowerment, feeling of being energized, and doing meaningful work. Some of it was also guided by external research, which I'm sure some of you are already aware that the external research shows that employees who feel a sense of thriving are more likely to perform well at their job, be more creative, support one another and work collaboratively, experience lower burnout, and have improved work well-being. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we leveraged our listening system to help support flexible work at Microsoft. So managers are crucial to holding the new flexible work operating model. As Joe Whittinghill, who is the Corporate Vice President of Talent Learning and Insights at Microsoft said, and I'm looking here because I don't want to misquote him, as we face the biggest shift to how we work in our generation, it's our managers who create the conditions and experiences that define what flexible work truly means. So I will be sharing an example of how we are supporting our managers. And there are multiple personas of managers, meaning managers have to lead their team, how managers work with their peers, how managers perform their own IC responsibilities, and how do they show up in front of their managers. So I'll be sharing just a sliver of analytics that we did for 2 of the personas. The first one is manager support for their team. So before I go into the data, I do want to call out that we generally look at correlations and not causation due to rules and regulations that we have to follow for internal employee data. So in case if anybody has those questions, hopefully level setting that is helpful. Now, how can managers make their employees feel empowered to choose their work site, where they work best? And by work site, I mean by working on site, or meaning coming into the office, going to client locations, working off site, working from home, coffee shop, anywhere where they work, but not coming on site, or hybrid, which is a mix of on-site, off-site. So based on qualitative analysis, we did notice skepticism by the employees regarding the new flexible work approach and its impact, which was pretty natural. The first thing that came to my mind when we were starting to come back into the office, and the decision was, if I work from home, how is this going to impact my career? So we did quite a bit of listening and ran various analytics to see how we can ensure that our employees feel supported and empowered to choose where they work from. So one that really sparked was the relationship between managers talking to their employees in one-on-one or team meetings regarding employee work site choices. So we call them making team agreements. We did see a high relationship and shared the insights with managers to help them support their teams in making the right choices. So that was one example of managers supporting their teams. Now let's talk about the next persona, which is the support the managers need as a manager to do their job, and to do their job leading team or their IC duties. Now, during the years as the pandemic unfolded and then the switch to hybrid operating model, employee well-being has been our priority. We have been monitoring employees' work-life balance and have been noticing a decline. Therefore, we wanted to understand the behaviors that were leading to that perception and what tools we can share with managers to help with their work-life balance. One reason to focus more on manager work-life balance, and I'm just saying more, we do focus on IC as well, but manager, because there's the gap between manager and IC perception of work-life balance is quite significant, and managers have a bigger opportunity on this front. Now, let's pause for a second and think, how many of you block time on your calendar to focus? Just focus on hard problems or just for quiet time to get work done during the day? It's pretty simple, but I'm sure it's pretty surprising to your own self about how many of us still don't subscribe to this practice. So now let's go into the details of why I even brought this up. So to understand the behaviors that were leading to the decline of work-life balance, we started by correlating data from workplace analytics and our daily signal survey. And I'll explain a little bit of what workplace analytics or WPA is. That is an org offering, and it is very different than Viva Insights that I shared before. Workplace Analytics is an org offering and is available as part of our Office 365 suite. And it uses existing communication and collaboration data, including email and calendar information, to understand how employees spend time and how the business can be more effective, and with targeted analysis that lets our leaders understand organization-wide trends and progress. So now, through our correlation analysis between our daily signal survey and WPO Workplace Analytics, we saw that employees satisfied with their work-life balance have 1.3 times the number of focus hours and 1.3 times the number of 2-hour blocks compared to employees less satisfied with their work-life balance. And this insight is true at an all-up Microsoft level, and it does hold true across our different orgs, but when drilled deeper into various demographics and organizational cuts, we notice trends of particular groups being more impacted. And when I talk about org cuts, that means engineering orgs versus our marketing orgs or HR, for instance. So we were able to provide these insights to our HR leaders supporting these teams and in emails to managers from our Chief HR Operating Officer, and to start adopting some of these practices. Now, we did perform another analysis by looking at correlations between daily signals and vacation days, and it revealed that employees who had 4 or less vacation days remaining reported 16 percentage points higher work-life balance than employees who had more than 4 days of vacation remaining. So this led to managers emphasizing the importance of taking time off to recharge and disconnect. And the 4-day threshold was determined using a decision tree. So there was no other magic number that was that was just declared by thinking about the 4-day threshold. Now, another important factor of work-life balance and productivity was the ability to prioritize effectively. So ICs who feel they receive effective prioritization, and ICs are individual contributors, support are 3.5 more times positive with regards to work-life balance than their counterparts who lack prioritization support. And this difference is a lot more pronounced for managers, since manager scores are 5 times more positive on work-life balance versus their counterparts. And then the last but not least, we have also been able to link customer satisfaction to the sentiment in our employee systems and our listening systems. And this is just one example where we were able to show that there is a correlation between customer satisfaction and those employees' perception of work-life balance. So we have also partnered very closely with our sales analytics team to understand sales behaviors of sellers and how that impacts revenue attainment using workplace analytics. And these are just a few examples of how we monitored sentiment and provided insights to help our employees succeed in the hybrid operating model, because work-life balance is tough, and especially when you're managing different schedules and employees in various time zones across the globe. our employees love the flexibility, but it will take time. And it will take time for our managers to build the muscle to lead effectively in hybrid operating model and maintaining work-life balance. Now, let's sum up the key takeaways to support employee work-life balance. So ensure clear prioritization, continue providing visibility to our existing policies, anticipated changes for the future, managers having open conversations with their team about their work-life preferences, optimize internal time and meetings. Those are some of the insights that I didn't go deeper into before, but they have been shared broadly via different articles that have been published by Microsoft. Avoid internal meetings on Monday mornings to ensure employees do not feel that they have to work on the weekends, just to help with their work-life balance so they have the chance to disconnect and recharge. Consider having all meetings begin 5 minutes past the half hour or an hour and 5 minutes early. So that is a practice which is very widely adopted at Microsoft. And encourage employees to take time off to rewind and recharge. And that has also been one of the other reasons why as most of you are already aware, Microsoft took off the limitation on paid time off, and we have unlimited time off here for most of the employees. Now, you might have seen that we have a lot figured out, but we really don't. And we do have our challenges, similar to and probably unique that a lot of other companies do. So a few themes include that data is never clean, like never. So there's a lot of work that we typically have to do when it comes to data and holding, thinking about all the nuances that are there. Our capability on applying data insights across the org and leaders is definitely an area of opportunity and something that the org and the teams are working on building and making it stronger. Prioritization of work, and especially now in the current economic conditions too, it is crucial. And that is one thing that our leaders heavily focus on now. And technology is changing so quickly, but it's also a huge opportunity for us in the way of upskilling all of our employees. Now, last but not least, I did want to share this slide. This slide includes a lot of articles that have been published by HRBI, either in Harvard Business Review or Work Trend Index report, which is published on the Work Lab. And all of these articles should be easily available to everyone. Most of them are around hybrid, but there are a few that are around different topics, including the onboarding buddy, an example that I shared earlier in our conversation. So that concludes my presentation for today. And I wanted to make sure I had some time today, or approximately 10 minutes, and I think I do for any Q&A that I can have right now as well.
Are there any questions in the Q&A box?
Yes, so I see one question is from Stephen. He is asking, what is the opt-out rate for network analyst participation? Is it different at Microsoft versus clients using Microsoft platforms?
Sorry, Howard, I totally got cut off. Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, no worries. What is the opt-out rate of network analyst participation? Is it different? Is that different at Microsoft versus clients using Microsoft platforms?
No, it is. It is different. People can opt out definitely if they do not want to be included, and there is a lot of difference, especially when it comes to global and different countries. We have to follow the rules and regulations of the labor union and the rights that are shared by the government. So we cannot track any data, even if it's an aggregated level, if it's not allowed based on the country.
Thank you. Another question coming is, how large is the HR analytics teams as a whole? And can you explain again the focus on the line analytics team?
Yes, so our team, in terms of the exact number, that is not something I can typically give out on, but our organization is very well, I would say, suited and established. Our organization is pretty significantly huge and is capable of supporting all of our HR employees. And in terms of the focus of the line analytics team, so they do very similar to what the COE analytics team does, but they are especially focused and aligned to the business. And an example would be, for example, we have engineering leaders. So we'll have a line analytics person who is tied to the engineering leader, and they focus on the metrics and the problems that are important for that engineering team versus any of the other teams, because all teams or employees work very differently. So everyone has their own personality, and each org has different issues that are brought up. So line teams are specifically focused on each individual businesses and HR consultants and HR VPs. And they do work very similar to our team in terms of working with our researchers. If there are specific questions that are needed, they work with the researchers to come up with an item to place in the survey if it needs to be monitored.
Thank you. We see another question is, can you elaborate it on what you mean by workplace analytics being different from Viva Insights or data source? And I think he is referring to the Viva Pulse, probably the feedback system.
Viva Pulse and workplace analytics. So there are two different ones.
Yeah. So on the question, it's asking about Viva Insights or Viva Insights data source, different by the workplace analytics.
Yes. So Viva Insights, that is something employees can see if you have, for example, Viva Insights Suite installed. We typically use Teams. So in Teams, there are different apps. So there's one app for Viva Insights. So I can actually go in, click there and see how much focus time did I have, how many hours I worked after hours, how much collaboration, meaning how many time I was in the meetings, how many meetings I attend, or how many meetings was I in and chatting myself away. So that is something that only I can access. Nobody can see any of that information. Now, what WPA or workplace analytics is that looks at all of email and calendar information and not at an individual level. It's an aggregated level. And again, there are a lot of nuances for that in terms of what can and can't be looked at. And that is to help our leaders think through. So the leaders will look at an org level, 10,000 employees. How are their behaviors? How many of them are potentially blocking focus time or not? And the ones who are blocking focus time, how are they responding to the surveys? So that is the difference. So WPA, Workplace Analytics, is an org offering, and Viva Insights is individual and only for employees, and employees have access.
Thank you. And another question coming in is, you mentioned the research around employees who has more or less than 4 vacation days remaining. With the move to unlimited time off, what time frame are you using to determine the 4-day mark?
That is a very good question. So we did this research a few months ago. So this was from last year, if I remember correctly, mid of last year. So at that time, we still had vacation days. Our unlimited vacation just started since this year, January. Hence you see the difference in that research.
Thank you. Another question, and the last question right now in the Q&A is, what do you think managers can be best to do to make the teams more comfortable with work-life balance in the virtual world? There always seems to be a bit of guilt when it comes to employee drawing lines between work and life.
That is such a good question, and that is something that we have been continuously monitoring throughout COVID-19, and we still are. And how to support our managers to make their employees very comfortable. One of the things that has been extremely helpful are the team agreements. And what team agreements also include is not just managers talking to their employees about, what are the timings that you want to work? Oh, where do you want to work from? But that also involves timings. For instance, hey, what are the best timings for me to get hold of you or have meetings? Because we have, for instance, if I think about our team, I think we just have 2 people here and everybody else is across the globe. So we have very much set timings that these are the days we're going to have meetings when all of the team needs to be together. So those team agreements have been very helpful for all the employees and managers having work-life balance and helping employees retain that work-life balance. And the other thing that Microsoft is really trying to promote is that the workday doesn't need to be 8 to 5. That is not what flexibility is. Workday could be me getting off at 3, picking up my kids and going home and logging in at 4 p.m. and then work till 7. That is work-life balance for me. But work-life balance for somebody else might mean 8 to 5, and we totally respect. So another practice that we typically ask all of our employees, keep your calendars updated, have very open conversations. And it's not just necessarily with your hierarchical teams, the direct teams, but V teams that we're not generally connected with, but we work on daily basis. I work more with other teams or our researchers than I work potentially with my immediate team. So I have rules set with them about what are the timings that work for all of us.
Thank you so much. And we have another question coming in. It's what's your opinion of what's the top few metrics or analytics that were appeared on the desktop of the Microsoft CHRO? I think that's an interesting one.
That now, I don't know if I can answer that question very intelligently without having more details. And the reason why I would ask is because there are metrics related to hybrid, then there are metrics related to employee retention, internal mobility, so what is on top of mind for the company? So the way how we think about it, our CHRO sits on the table with all the other executives and our CEO Satya, and it is decided among everybody there, okay, what is top of mind for all the leaders? And then that is how our team gets our directives in terms of this is what needs to be our focus to help improve XYZ. So it's definitely tied to the company policy, and those metrics can change. Some of the ones that I'm sure very open to most of the other companies, including attrition and internal mobility and how do we retain our talent, those of course are always on top of mind for everyone.
Thank you so much. I see that's the question we received for right now. I see a raise of hand of Tushara. Go ahead.
Nothing. I was just pointing out that there's a question in the chat as well. It says, if someone is into workday support, how do they transform their career into people analytics?
Sorry, can you say that again, Tushara?
Sure. The question is from Anush S, and it asks as if someone is into workday support, how do they transform their career into people analytics?
That's a good question. And please feel free to ping me on LinkedIn because my background is in finance. I started off in investment banking and then I worked in corporate finance for a really long time. So I switched into people analytics 3.5 years ago when I joined Microsoft, but the journey and the support that has been provided is incredible. There's a lot of learning. You should be very open to upskill yourself. And we have a policy of growth mindset. So anything we feed off of each other's knowledge. We work with each other. I sit with the researchers every day and a lot of knowledge. And I did take some very in-depth data science courses as well as I was in my role. So that has been super helpful in making me successful in my job. But happy to connect if you want to ping me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I think with no more questions, we can proceed, Professor.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Maria, for those valuable data-driven insights from the research at Microsoft, and I look forward to future results from that research. And also, I appreciate your offering to have people ping you if they're interested in knowing more about the career opportunities at Microsoft. We have a lot of very good people analytics folks who are involved with this conference, and including our the coordinators that you're hearing now, Howard and Priya. So they're actually out there looking for internships, I believe, right? Okay.
Thank you.
So anyway, here's a possible opening for those people who are interested in learning more. Now let's move on, and it's my sincere pleasure to introduce our speakers from Accenture. which has been a participant at the conference for 5 years in a row. Presentation today will address Accenture's unique approaches to how technology and analytics enable people to thrive in remote work. And they're going to provide the best practices and lessons learned from them. One presenter will be Lili Duan. Dr. Duan is Managing Director, Accenture Strategy and Consulting and Talent and Organization Human Potential. We're very happy to welcome back Lili for a 3rd year in a row. And joining Lili for the first time will be Gary Hill, Managing Director, Talent and Organization and Human Performance. So, Lili and Gary, the floor is yours.
Yeah, let me just quickly share my screen. Let me know if you're able to see it.
Yes, we are able to see that.
It's great. So thank you so much for having us back. For me personally, for the 3rd years in a row, for Accenture's for the 5th years in a row, to share what the research, the client experience, as well as some of the best practices we have learned and some of the lessons that we have observed in the specific field, and particularly in the center around the future of work, the remote work, and how technology and analytics as the two important and critical pillars to ensure the success in this field. With that said, and today's I'll do a quick introductions about myself, and then Gary, I will turn the mic to you and for you to do an intro there. Lili Duan, I'm a Managing Director based in Los Angeles. I'm leading a global group within Accenture, specifically focusing on people, talent, organization analytics for client-facing opportunities. And anything you can thinking about associated with talent and people analytics, it's our teams following our teams domains in a way. And super excited to share what we have in this field. And Gary, to you.
Yes, hi everyone. So similar to Lili, I'm also part of our talent and organization practice, and really work with clients to help them think through their strategies and approaches to continuously transform the way they manage talent, really driven by data. And then, over time, also thinking about how can they transform, how can they operate more efficiently, how do they win the war on talent. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how do you use some of those insights to think about driving your talent strategies, your people strategies, and how to get the most of it. And I work with many global clients in that capacity and helping them transform. And similar to Lili, I'm based out of Southern California, but work with clients at a global level.
And today's we'll have 30 minutes with you, and we probably will spending roughly about 10 minutes to talk about Accenture's latest research, as well as point of views that we have center around future work, and basically what is the CEO's mind towards future work, as well as what is the employee's wants in this new areas of ways of working. And we'll share some of the research and aspect, and as well as some of the good practice from those efforts, and followed with the 2 specific client examples. One of them is really focusing on the how we're able to leverage technology and analytics to transform the ways of working. The second case example will showcase and how we leverage the data and technologies to create this new ways of workings, as a journey forward. With that said, I will just quickly lay back to some of the core questions, and we have been asking ourselves as well as to help our clients in this field. And this particular research, as you can see, the 4 things that we have identified is to showcase that generally speaking, employees' life and work-life balance. And some of the, Maria has shared from a Microsoft research is the same effort is life has getting much harder and tough in these new areas after COVID. And those challenges continue being the case after the COVID. And they're looking for organizations to provide those support. However, the kind of support they would want and they would like to get has not been fully fulfilled by the organizations in a way. Some of the numbers were saying that only a third of the employees feels their work is linked to the broader purpose, and only a third of them the trust the organization leaders would have their interest of their heart. This particular research, along some of the good questions that we're able to address forward, is based on Accenture's annual research effort starting from 2021, the spring, and we repeat the research in the February of 2022, and surveyed over 10,000 employees across 13 countries, as well as 12 different industries. Besides that, and we also had additional effort in collecting inputs from over 200 CEOs across those same industry and geography to understand this future of work related topic. And the 4 questions that we have been asked, and those 4 questions were associated, when we talk about the future of work, so it's less related to about what. And it is important to figure out what is future of work, but more important, why we need future of work, along with how it should be executed, as well as when it should become critical. And to keep those questions in mind, and as I mentioned, for the specific research, we reach out to the global participants from the CEO levels to the frontline employee level. The first questions we ask a question is, what is an organization's purpose centered around the future of work? And here you can see some of the results that we have. About slightly over half of the CEOs, and then as I mentioned, there are 200 CEOs, were saying purpose is more of talent brand tool than a real mechanisms for change in a way. So the purpose driven and center around purpose, it's one of the core elements associated with the future of work. And oftentimes the narrow definition of future work is like, oh, we figure out the remote, we figure out technology, we figure out, like where I put my people and shall I bring them back to the company or not. It's actually go broader than that. It's really around why this is matter and what is the purpose as organizations. We provided those capabilities, we provided this new ways of working back to our employees, and therefore using that as a ways to attract, retain talent. The second question that we also try to answer, following up as the purpose of the work or the value, the answer the questions about why is the how, particularly, and we have emphasized towards the business leaders and like how they can best support their people to do so. And here's some of the data points that we have seen here is the very important component is the business leader and the leaderships, the roles that they play in this context of the future of work. And you can never, we're not saying that not importance of the technology, we're not saying not the importance of the analytic, but all of that is to provide insights, is provide enablements for the leaders and for the managers, for the team leads, for enable them to create that kind of support for the employees to empower and ensure that they live into this new ways of working. The third one is, from the organization's aspect, as well as from the business leaders' point of view, is The ultimate goal is to provide that employee experience. This new ways of working, this new employee experience is really help us to enable this future ways of working. And we introduce a concept that's called Omni Connected as a new ways of working. It means that with the technologies and with this new ways of working, with the new organization cultures, people feel like they can work anywhere and work on what they want and what they need, enabled and empowered, enabled and empowered to create that new employee experience. That is as the fundamental goals that we try to achieve from the future of work. The last but not least, while we're driving towards this new approach, one of the common challenge that we often get asked by the clients is like, hey, it's great that we drive this new technology implementations or created this new ways of working, but our clients or the employees were not up to speed towards the technology skills, towards the digital skills. And I can give you one specific example. I will not name the name of the client. And we introduce the new digital ways of working to enable them to work from anywhere. But when we launched that transformation effort, one of the clients were saying, hey, for this digital transformation, can we track can we track the progress through a paper checking list? We're saying, no, you shouldn't. And let's leverage technology and the digital skills to do that. But the comments is like, but I don't believe our people have a ways to interact and use the smart technology. So this as an example is to highlight the importance. While we're introducing new ways of working, let's not forget to equip and upskill the employees, enable them to adapt to this new ways of working. With those 4 elements, specific questions get answers, and I want to introduce some of the best practice that we have been observed as a good insights across the the hundreds of Accenture clients that we have been serving. And some of here you can see a spectrum of the remote work. From one end is standardized policies, everyone come back to work. Come back is 100% on site. On the other side is as a spectrum, you see the no policies. Whatever you want to do, individual employee decide whether I want to go remote or whether I want to go on site. Majority of the companies, our clients, 90+ of them turn to take a hybrid approach. Means it's not 100%, everyone go back to work. It's also not, 100% and say, hey, you decide what you want for yourself. And when they take that hybrid approach, there's a pro and a cons, and some of the lessons that learned, that also good practices we have identified as the 5 key things as a good practices to deploy those hybrid way of working is the flexible working, and how we're able to best provide flexibility associated working using that as a ways to go. Another one is let's still ensure the in-person connectivity time as another good practice. The third one is no size fits all. And some of the examples that Gary will introduce for our first client example will showcase how important we create the personas or the individual views towards what is the best approach for certain organization groups. The fourth one is human-led culture and how we're able to best create this connectivity, the connected experience using technology and analytics in a way. And that's, my case example will showcase some of those specific insights, how to do so. The last one is not the least, the decision-making framework and who should make what decisions for what elements associated with the future work. That's of the remote work. That's another very important component to ensure you do it right if you want to approach this new model or new ways of working. And with that said, we will quickly turn into some of the case examples that we have as a showcase. We'll turn the mic to Gary.
Great, thank you, Lili. And so I'd like to set the context of this client and case study. And this client, I was working with this client, helping them with some of their strategy around talent and the future of where they wanted to go. And this client's a Bay Area-based client in a very highly competitive medical device industry. And they were coming back from the pandemic and really trying to solve for a couple of things. One is, as we all know, real estate in the Bay Area can be expensive. So they're trying to think about, well, how much real estate do they really need going forward? And so the CFO was really interested to say, look, in thinking about the hybrid model, how much do I, if I don't need the same capacity of real estate based on FTEs, what does that really look like? At the same time, the CHRO was trying to understand if we're going to grow, this is a very fast growing company at like 30–40% a year. They were looking to more than double in the next 3 years. Where they're going to get the talent from, and can they really look at thinking about different strategies and work models to address some of their talent needs? So this was really thinking about talent, thinking about a very competitive industry. Not only are they competing with others in the medical devices industry, but to grow, they need to have robotic engineers, they need to have scientists, they need to have data scientists. And as you can imagine, those are in high demand, not only in the industry, but many industries, the self-driving car, robotics, and many others. So we then sort of talked to them about, well, we can drive and help you get the insights through data and through analytics. And so we were able to do a survey across a large part of the organization and really get insights and break those insights down by different parts of the organization, looking at tenure, looking at location, looking at job role, and understanding what did the managers want and what did the employees want. And there was some really interesting aha moments and sometimes hypotheses that we wanted to test. And so one of the hypotheses, there were 5 overall, but one of them was being in the Bay Area, predominantly there's pretty bad traffic. So one hypothesis was, the commute time is really going to be part of the challenge, and that's really going to drive people to want to work remotely because they just don't want to really do the commutes. And actually, commuting time wasn't so much a deciding factor, although you can see from the numbers here when we surveyed the data, thousands of hours were being spent just commuting to and from work. And so when it came to value of time, it was really, when we looked at what managers were looking for, they were saying, when we bring our teams together, when we bring our people together, we want that to be purposeful. We don't just want to tell people come into the office just for them to sit at the desk and then drive all the way home. And so they want that work when they do come together to be really purposeful. And that was quite key. Productivity was an interesting issue as well, because there were some theories about remote work. People are not as productive and a bit disconnected, and you can't really track them per se. But in fact, it was the opposite. By far, a large part, 94% here, saying they were more productive at home, highly productive, working remote, and a much smaller percentage of the on-site employees were saying there was as productive. So, but so that was key, understanding the productivity. And then it was also then, well, if you're not on site, is it really impacting innovation, ability to innovate? And certainly majority was saying, no, we can be productive, we can innovate, etc. But there was a little bit of loss of in-person culture. And so how can you think about culture and how can you drive behaviors from sort of in-person culture? It was interesting. Last week I was in London at another client doing some workshops, and Thursday night we went out with the client, and London was like, I can't believe how busy it was. Just every bar, every restaurant, every pub was busy. And I said, like, wow, like, is this normal? And they're like, well, it's really because of the new work model. And they said Thursdays is the new Friday. So everybody was coming back into the office on Thursdays, particularly, and many I talk to have hybrid models. Thursday happened to be the one common denominator where people make a point of coming back into the office. So they can have a little bit of that in-person culture. They can go back, and sort of, after work and have a little bit of social life. So anyway, I thought that was quite interesting. I knew Thursday is the new Friday. The third one is really about growth. Like, can you grow my skills, and can I grow and learn if I'm mostly remote in some model? And most reported, yes, they can grow and learn. But leaders wanted a little bit more of that on-site, hands-on, to bring teams back together. They thought that was more productive to grow and learn. But certainly employees, majority of them felt like they could still build their skills in this model. We thought maybe employees that were there, maybe hired during the pandemic, desperately wanted to come back on site and meet others, but regardless of tenure, it was a small percentage. Certainly leaders were more inclined to try to bring some of those employees back site. And at the end of the day, the model preference, was there a preference of any particular model? And at the end of the day, most employees wanted flexibility. Most employees felt like there was some value in coming back together, but really wanted flexibility. And so at the end of the day, the hybrid model was by far sort of the more comfortable approach. A small amount of leaders really did want the on-site, but in general, hybrid and some combination was most important for this client. So if you go to the next slide, Lili. So what does that mean? And how do we continue to get some true insight that we can drive a strategy and behavior? At the end of the day, more than 50%, sort of those that were hybrid, those that were fully remote, more than 50% were very happy with the model. And then there were some that wanted a little bit more on-site or maybe a bit more flexibility. There were very few that really wanted to spend that much more time on site. And at the end of the day, I think key thing takeaway here is flexibility is key. Having a purpose when you do get together is key. But giving teams and giving managers the flexibility of how do you drive that behavior when you come on site, and how do you really drive an outcome with that focused time when you are together, and not just sort of come into the office for the sake of coming to the office, because there was data that showed you can be very productive when you're not on site. And then, so what does it mean in terms of the models? If you go to the next slide. So at the end of the day, you've probably seen in the press, some companies have and some leaders have you got to be back in the office. It's the only way we're really going to drive our culture, and working really hard. But I would say generally, we're seeing the full return into the office as being sort of the exception to the rule for the most part. I think seeing some sort of mix of set schedule, 2-3 days a week, the example I gave with this client, they last week in London, they tried to do a Tuesday, Thursday, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It seems like nobody wants to travel a Monday, Friday. And really letting the teams decide that. I spoke to a couple of the individuals, and generally their team is try to meet 3 days a week if they can. But again, it's not mandatory. Some days was, some weeks was only two the week coming on site. So really having a schedule where you can align around a team level, have it be leader-led, don't dictate it. Top down, I think, is most important. Having, really listening to the employees and leaders trusting employees, and having that level of trust and accountability to come in and be productive when they're remote, but when they're coming with a sense of purpose, and really driving collaboration and innovation when they are face to face. And ultimately, most important is, like Lili has also talked about, in this omni-connected world where we connected in multiple ways, sometimes digital, sometimes physical, and through other mechanisms, is most important in the model, and how this can be successful. And so this client was very happy with the outcome. and helped them drive some talent strategies, and helped them think about where they can go and find some of that more difficult talent, where it doesn't necessarily have to be in the Bay Area. It helped them with some of their workspace planning and where they wanted to go, and was all data-driven with insight.
Great. So given the time, I will just quickly move to the second case example. And this example is as a complementary approach towards what Gary has been sharing. Back to those 4 key things I have mentioned a little bit is, purpose-driven, leaders-led, leaders, roles towards define the new ways of working. The third element is how do we provide the kind of employee experiences needed for the right personas. The last one is how we're able to provide digital and technology upscaling opportunities to enable employees are able to adapt it to this new ways of working. And this example I want to showcase is the uniqueness is how we're able to embed analytic into the implementations of the adoption towards this new digital ways of working. And here we're just quickly showing for this particular client a similar context. They used to be having everyone, they call it on campus, means that everyone need to show up physically, in an office. And after COVID, everyone is actually asked to work remote. And one of the key questions is how we're able to first provide those digital ways of working and ensure people know how to use those technologies for teams and for calls and for meetings and all of that. And the second is really how do we create this new digital working culture, including setting norms, including finding empowerment, enablements in a ways. And that's what we said is how we're able to create this omni-connected culture for these organizations, but more importantly, how we're able to use analytic and measurement to continue to track and showcase how the organization is adapted to this new way of working, as well as its ultimate impact on well-being, impact on team effectiveness, impact on whether people are more satisfied and happier with this new approach. And with that said and I want to quickly, given the time, I want to quickly showcase the analytic approach that we have been taking. And here is the analytic conceptual models that we use. We create a measurement framework. On the left-hand side is the combinations of mindset and behaviors. Use that to define of this new ways of working or new associated with as a showcase here, associated with autonomy, collaboration, flexibility, white space, and a connection. The important part of this, for example, the mindset we're able to capture and say, hey, do you have the do you have the alignment mindsets towards what I do is aligned with the purpose of the organizations, what my daily working is actually aligned with my team objectives. And there's a capture of the mindset shift. On the other hand, the digital behavior is another component measurement that we integrate with the mindset. And here you see the Microsoft WPA is get highlighted. Some of the best practice that like that we heard from our Microsoft presenters is it's using this as approach. Again around alignment from a digital behavior perspective. How do we define alignment? And we, throughout all the Microsoft WPA indicators, we say, hey, whether you have at least one-on-one check-in with your managers, it's a good indicators towards alignment. And what we have found at the data we're saying is that like many of the, and at the beginning of the journey, many of their employees don't even have a one-on-one alignment with their managers for a whole month. And so that is a good aha moment from a digital behavior aspect. And we're also able to use that as a ways to introduce the norm, the new digital ways of working and the new norms, and also enabled with Microsoft learnings and some of the other digital platform learnings, and is to help people to know how to use those capabilities and adapt it to the technologies. And more important, well, on one hand, we evaluate the behavior and mindset indicators. It's also very important in the equation, analytic equation, we constantly measure the outcomes. As I mentioned, these organizations care about 4 things: employee well-being, team effectiveness, agile ways of working, as well as digital adaptiveness. So we're able to link those mindset and behavior indicators towards those outcomes, and to understand for any given business units, which mindset has the biggest impact towards the outcomes in a way. And then here you can see, now we have a live analytics system constantly provide, we call the real-time informations towards how a particular given organizations were doing, unit were doing on those mindset and behavior indicator, as well as what is their impact towards the outcome. Using that as a ways to help us, provide an ongoing prescriptive analytic insights on, hey, for so-and-so teams, and it looks like you're lacking on the alignment. Therefore, we will provide more alignment enablement activities such as learning and training to help your peoples to improve and enhance the alignment elements towards the outcomes in a way. So with that said, this is another examples to showcase how we embed analytic into to help organizations to adapt to the new ways of working. It's all falling into our, like the 4 key questions we try to answer. I want to bring back to, that themes. And first is the future of work need to be purpose driven. We need to understand what is the purpose, why we're doing this. The second element is really link back to the roles of leaders, and from a business leaders to the team leads towards their roles to ensure the success of the transformation. The third element is really associated with what kind of employee experiences that we provide back to the different kind of personas within the organization. The last one, as I mentioned, is not the least, how we're able to provide a constant learning and trainings to help employees to adapt to the new ways of working, particularly Accenture around the digital ways of working and the technology adapted to the new technologies. So this is the, summarize the presentations of from Accenture's part towards, how we help our clients to in the remote work context. Hold back to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Lili and Gary, for identifying some best practices and lessons learned and enabling people to thrive in a remote work environment. And now we come to a short break. Well, I'll be for 15 minutes, and we'll see you back at 4 p.m. Everybody can go take a drink, have some munchies and whatever.
See ya.
Hope everybody's back from their break and had some refreshments and ready to go for the second half of the program. And I'm delighted to welcome the speaker from our conference's industry sponsor, ROI Institute, which is making its debut in our annual event. Dr. Patty Phillips, the Chief Executive Officer of ROI Institute. She will report about measuring ROI of remote work. Patty?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to see everyone. It's a great way to spend the afternoon is talk about ROI. We always enjoy that. So I just am really happy that you guys are here and that I have the opportunity to share with you some of the work that we've done, but particularly focus on this conversation about measuring ROI in remote work. So I am trusting that. Thank you, Andy. I'm joined here today with Andy Vance, who is our producer on our end at ROI Institute. So he's out there as well. So thanks, Andy, for letting me know all is working. So, and hopefully you've enjoyed the conference so far. So today we're going to talk about ROI, or demonstrating the ROI of remote work. And these are just some of the resources that we have available to you. So I'm going to walk you through a case study. And again, we only have the 30 minutes. So I'll take you quickly through the case study. Maybe we'll have time during the panel to have a conversation. But if not, some of the resources we're giving you first, the application guide. So this is the process that was used to actually evaluate this particular remote work intervention. This describes our ROI methodology is the most applied approach to demonstrating value for money that we can find out there. We work in learning and development. We work with change management, remote work, all throughout human capital, but also marketing, Lean Six Sigma, humanitarian programs. So our process covers all of them, and we have about 100 books published in the process. We'll also give you the slide deck if you're interested. And also the case study that I'm going to describe for you today, we'll give that to you so you have that to reference once we're over. So those are just some of the resources. And then in terms of the objectives, it's really just to explore how to demonstrate ROI of remote work. Again, big topic today, but not a new topic. People have been working remotely for many, many years and have been demonstrating the value of doing so. Of course, the pandemic threw us into this conversation a little more deeply than we had been, but there is a way to demonstrate the value of remote work and including the actual return on investment. And we don't see that much today. We know from surveys there's value, from employee perspectives there's value, then there's the other side of that conversation, but there's not a lot about, well, what's the real ROI on this? So we're going to show you one organization's case study and how to do it. And then talk about the lessons that they learned from this particular case study. So real quick, rapid fire chat, just to get everybody, it's the end of the day, it's 4 o'clock, you're talking about ROI, oh my goodness, you know, that's a heavy load. So rapid fire chat, just to wake you up a minute and also to let me know what you're thinking in terms of the pros and cons of remote work. In the chat, just quickly, pros and cons, just give me a list. What are you thinking top of your head? Pros and cons of remote work. I know you've been having this conversation today, and so this is probably a repeat of some of what you've had, but I want to know what you're thinking. So thanks, Greg. Autonomy, flexibility, these are all pros. Although some managers would say, no, those are cons, right? Work-life balance. Okay, what else are we seeing, guys? Focus. Okay, could be a pro, could be a con. The lack thereof. Bigger talent pool, love it, Maria. Yeah, more people accessible to us. Right? Mental well-being. Yeah, again, that could be mental well-being for many, for others not so, because as you know, today we're finding that the flexible work is causing us to work a little bit more over the weekends than we needed to. But yeah, there's definitely mental well-being tied to it. Okay. Okay, less commute. Love it, Peggy. Yeah, less commute. Autonomy, culture alignment is tough. Thanks, Julie. Yeah. and Greg's got flexibility. So a lot of pros and cons to it. And of course, everything that you guys listed is what we all have seen, right? There's conveniences of remote work, work-life balance, if we will balance it, cost to us personally, fuel costs, there's the environmental impact on the con side. You know, some of us may feel a bit lonely. We're a little bit isolated. It's hard for that alignment, to get that alignment in terms of culture, career disconnect. And it'd be interesting if you guys are seeing the same thing. You know, for many organizations, showing up counts if you want career progression. So how do you ensure you can be visible while not being there? So a lot of things. Now, interesting article last year was published in Harvard Business Review. We talk about environmental impact as a positive, but what we have seen since the pandemic is not as positive as we would like to think. So that environmental impact, it is important, it's positive, but we've got to make sure we're moderating some other behaviors from working at home as well to get that impact. But so many pros, yet balanced with so many cons. But again, the real question is, but in the end, what is the real return on investment? Do the benefits exceed the cost? And that was a question this one organization set out to answer. It was a health and life insurance company. They're about 80-year-old companies. They've been around for a little while. It was growing extremely fast. They had a lot of new employees, and there was this one function that was really bursting at the seams in terms of the growth. The healthcare costs were growing and still are, but at the time of the case, they were growing. And so they were having to charge or increase their premiums for their coverage while still being that low cost provider, because that was one of the advantages of working with this organization. They began this approach using a model, a framework that we have used for many, many years. It's developed in the 70s by my husband and business partner, Jack Phillips. We use it across any type of program because of the logic. But what it does, and all of you as researchers know, that anytime we start a research project, we're going to start with a way to categorize data. You're categorizing like measures. And that's what this allows us to do. But it also represents that chain of impact that occurs as we involve people in programs, projects, and initiatives. And it all begins with that investment. So in this case, it was about the investment in remote work, who's going to be involved, how much we're going to spend. But then also to ensure success, we've got to make sure that those people involved in this change, in this initiative, view it as pertinent to them. It's pertinent to their work. It's relevant to them. They are bought into it, because people have to buy into the solutions we put before them, or they're not going to do it, or they're going to be miserable doing it. They have to learn the rules. They have to learn the technology. They have to know what it is they need to know to do what we want them to do. They have to know how they best work, and they can best perform to make something work. And then they have to go out and do it. So application, people need to do what we want them to do. They need to follow the process. They need to design their work environment in such a way that it works for them and for the organization. So we look at that application. So when we look at reaction and learning type measures, we're looking at buy-in, or people buying into whatever the solution is we're presenting them, and do they know what they need to know to do it? So are they willing and able to do what we want them to do? In an application, we follow up to see if people are in fact following the process, following the policies, their behaviors are changing if that's part of it. They're doing what they need to do to make sure performance is going in the direction it needs to. So we look at this application data, what we call level 3 application data, from a system perspective. Are the employees doing their part, but are the managers doing their part? And then does the system that support managers and employees, is it doing its part to make this work? And then we look at the so what of it all, the business impact. Are we seeing improvement in measures of output, quality, cost, time, customer satisfaction, job satisfaction, work habits, innovation? And how much of that improvement is actually due to this solution and not something else? So how much of that improvement in those measures is due to this shift to remote work and not something else? That's looking at results from a business perspective, the impact of what we're doing. But then here's the thing that is missed a lot in all these articles and these surveys that we're seeing is, do these benefits that we claim to be true, are they first due to remote work, the improvement, but also what is it really worth to the organization? So if we convert that to money, what is it worth? And then how much did it cost you to convert people to this remote work environment? And then we compare the benefits and the costs. That's the ultimate question is, are the benefits outweighing the cost? So when we talk about ROI, we're talking about the fundamental metrics, benefit cost ratio and the ROI percentage. And we show both of these just because every now and then there's some confusion. Is typically around the ROI, but they're both you're getting there the same way. They're related, they're cousins. So we're going to get there the same way, but the output is different. So with your benefit cost ratio, you look at the benefits of whatever your solution is. And in this case, it's remote work. We look at the monetary benefits, compare it to the cost of the solution. So if we're improving productivity, what does that productivity look like in terms of money, in terms of cost savings, for example? Or if it's sales related in terms of profit increase, for example. And that numerator is always annualized. Your BCR and ROI look at an annual rate of return. So it's an annual monetary benefit of improving the measures that you've improved by shifting people to remote work or whatever your solution is. And then your project cost is the total cost of doing it. So you're looking at benefits compared to cost. And then your ROI is the net. So classic ROI is earnings compared to investment. Here we're just looking at net benefits. So program benefits or project benefits compared to project cost times 100, that gets us that percentage. So those are the two formulas that we're working with when we talk about the ROI and remote work. So this is just an example. And here's a quick math problem for you. I'm sorry to do this, but I do a math problem every time. So you can ask Andy, it's always happening. Let's assume that we've implemented a program and we've reduced the number of safety related incidents. Over the course of the year, we've saved the organization $750,000 as a result of reducing safety related incidences. But the program itself, for the 25 people involved, cost us $425,000. What is the BCR and the ROI? And only do this one more time to level set what we're talking about when we talk about ROI. So real quick, let's do your math. I know you've got your calculator handy because this is an ROI, 30 minutes of ROI. So what's your BCR and your ROI real quick? Only math problem of this half hour. And don't be bashful. And Andy, well, you're welcome, Andy, to jump in there if you want to do your math problem. All right, thanks, Howard. 76.74. Thank you, kind sir. So if we're talking about the BCR, again, the BCR is the gross benefits compared to the cost. Your BCR would be 1.76. or typically written 1.76 to 1. That's telling us for every $1 we invest in remote work or whatever the solution is, we're getting $1.76 back in gross benefits. ROI, again, is the net for every, so it's a 76% return on the investment. So for every $1 we invest, we get the dollar back plus an additional 76 cents. So it's the net benefits, 76% return on that investment. So again, just level setting how we're defining ROI. And then the process involved in this case followed just a 12-step process. It began by sorting out why they wanted to go to remote, what measures they wanted to look at, and then the solution itself. What did that solution look like? Who was going to be involved and how are they designing it to make it work? And they set some very clear expectations that the employees and the managers all agreed upon. So it began with alignment in terms of expectations. They rolled out the solution and they started collecting data throughout the process. They wanted to make sure everyone was bought in from the beginning. So when they first launched the idea, they actually gave people an out and they said, okay, if you don't want to do, you don't have to participate. But those people participating had to be bought in at the outset. The managers had to be bought in. And then they also had to understand the rules of the game. They put parameters around them. They had rules, for example, it's remote work. It is work. It is not a vacation. It is not time to get your hair done. It's not time to take care of the babies. This is work. And here's how the process is going to work. Here are the parameters. And while they did give them some flexibility, of course, it wasn't an all-in flexible work arrangement. They built a box around it. But everyone agreed to it and everyone said, okay, we get it. We know what it is we need to know. They made sure people knew the technology and how things worked, but they were collecting these data not only at the beginning, but throughout the time period that they evaluated it. They actually did check-ins with them 30, 60, and 90 days throughout the process. Application, 30, 60, 90 days, following up to see if in fact people were complying. They did leverage technology to monitor meetings and what was happening in terms of managers having the focused meetings with the employees. And then they looked at the impact. So were these measures improving? And at the point in time, did those measures improve enough to suggest there was greater benefit than cost? From an analysis standpoint, they used comparison group to isolate the effects of the program to see if in fact the difference in that control, or more of a comparison group, because it wasn't true experimental design, but it was a comparison group. Did we get greater benefit from those who are working remote versus those who are not? From a data conversion standpoint, converting their measures to money, they had standard values for several of the measures that they focused on. Some they actually used estimates. Fully loaded cost, I've outlined the cost for you, but they included all the cost of the program, calculate the ROI, plus they captured some intangibles, which included environmental impact. And then they rolled out the results of the story and actually used the data to improve future rollout of this remote work solution. So here's why they did it. So the organization, this is step one in our process. The organization wanted to improve productivity, also reduce some cost savings, because as I mentioned at the beginning, they were just exploding at the seams. They had hired so many people and they wanted to reduce the cost of the office, but also they had an employee turnover issue. So these were the three major measures they focused on: productivity, cost savings, and employee turnover. Some other things they wanted to make sure they managed and improved: stress of the employees, job satisfaction. They also wanted to ensure the employees felt like this was a convenient way to do the best job they could. And then also give their employees some work-life balance because they were working so much at the office. Community responsibility, corporate social responsibility was a big part of what was important, not just to the leaders of the organization, but to employees and to their customers. So they wanted to demonstrate that there was a significant environmental impact to remote work. They piloted the solution in the claims department, and they worked with their claims processors and their claims examiners. So you can see here on the slide the number of employees that were the claims processors. There were 715, 235 claims examiners, and that's a total of 950 employees. This is the number that was interested in work. And as I mentioned, they gave them the option to participate. You had 259 claims processors who were interested in the remote work. 83 of the examiners were interested. So it started at 342 people who were interested. Then you see who actually worked at home. It was 300, ended up being 311 people who actually worked at home. They rolled out the solution and started collecting the data. What they found through the data collection, and this was collected using survey data, so questionnaires. Participants all bought in. It's just a standard Likert type scale. Standard all bought in. They were satisfied with the work arrangement. They knew that this remote work arrangement, or they felt like this new remote work arrangement would be important to their success on the job. They were motivated, and you'll see in just a few minutes, some of that motivation is actually helped them reduce some of their own personal expense. From the managers, you know, their target was 4 out of 5, so everyone was satisfied that the managers were satisfied with this as a work alternative, and they recognized that there needed to be a different work alternative, and remote work could work for them. From a learning perspective, everyone indicated for the most part that they understood how this process worked. They felt like the employees felt like they had the discipline necessary to do the job. They could work independently, work away from the office in their own homes. Everyone agreed for the most part that they understood the rules of the process and the parameters within which they were going to have to work. Managers the same. Managers felt like they were confident enough to manage their employees who were working remotely. And they actually had some skill practice for the managers in terms of having the performance conversations with their employees who are working at home. So actually developing those manager skills to manage remote workers. From an actual application standpoint, again, here they followed up 30, 60, 90 days to see how it was going with the employees. You see 93% of the managers were reported as conducting those employee meetings. These data were picked up on the calendaring system, which is, is a good system to do it. They also got some feedback during interviews on this, but they started by collecting those data in that calendaring system. There's always a conversation around the reliability of those data, but that was their process of choice, but also had good conversations during interviews with the managers and some of the employees that supported that this was going on. 36%, so 300 of the 342, and you saw this, of the 342 participants, 36% actually did volunteer to work at home. Not everyone did, and they knew it was not suitable for everyone. In total, they built 340 home offices. Work at home employees rated 4.3 out of 5 on working effectively. So again, self-report on how they were doing on the job. 95% reported that workplace was free of distractions. They would have liked to have seen 100% report that. Again, it is self-report on those employees' perceptions, but there were interviews conducted with the managers and the employees and the conversations that seemed to support the findings in the survey. Managers administered the policy appropriately. These data were collected from both the employees and the managers. And then managers said that they, in terms of managing remote employees effectively, you can see it fell under the 4.0. They said maybe it's not as effective as they could be. And again, data were collected in the interviews from both the employees as well as the managers. These are coming off the surveys. But from an application standpoint, based on these data and the interviews that were conducted with the managers and the employees, everyone felt like the process that they'd put into place to ensure success with remote work was actually working. Now, barriers to success in this remote working solution was the biggest barrier listed, and there weren't many. For the most part, the process worked. That manager support was lacking. That rose to the top for those who said there were barriers. Having that support staff that you have within an office space, that was lacking. It was a little bit of an inhibitor. Communication breakdowns, a little bit of an inhibitor, and then career progression. And again, feeling like they weren't being given opportunities because they were working remotely, they weren't being seen. So those were the top barriers. But again, for the most part, the enabling factors were the strongest. I mean, the program really did seem to work from a process standpoint. This personal cost savings in terms of an enabler, that was really a motivator for them. The employees saw such a cost savings to them working at home. They wanted to do a good job at home because it was affecting their pocketbook. So not just the pocketbook of the organization, but direct pocketbook savings to them. Big motivator for employees. They did have some flexibility, even though there were parameters around it. They gave them parameters, and you're at work. You're not playing, you're at work. But they did have some flexibility to do some scheduling, as long as they scheduled some of the things that other things they had to do. So they did have some flexibility. That was a big motivator. And then of course, convenience and work-life balance were of the top enabling factors. Now, in terms of the impact data, they looked at productivity, office expense, and then employee turnover, the big business measures, and then some intangibles, including environmental impact. So these are the business measures. They're productivity measures, office expense, turnover. In terms of productivity, they define productivity by claims processed and claims examined. So two different measures of productivity. The work at home group, you can see their performance with claims processed, claims examined, but also office expense per person, and then turnover. So that they still had some turnover happening. But as you'll see, when you compare it to the comparison group, the turnover was not as great. So we're going to have a difference there. Claims processed, a little bit higher productivity for those working at home, a little bit higher for those working at home with claims examined, so the examiners. Office expense, a little bit higher than that of those working at home. And like I said, turnover was greater for those who were not working at home. So still a little bit of turnover, didn't alleviate it completely, but not as much as those who were working from the office. And then you see the change here. So 2.2 in terms of claims processed, a difference of 1.9 in terms of claims examined. Office expense was a $4,500 difference, and then the difference in turnover is 41. And then you see the number of participants, and you'll see how this plays out in the next slide. So productivity, to get it to the money, the cost of one claim was $10 per claim. The cost of one disputed claim was $12. Daily improvement claims processed per day was 2.2. Daily improvement in terms of disputed claims 1.9. The annual value of claims from the claims processors, so claims processed, annual value was 1.1 million. So 132,560 to be exact. And then in terms of the productivity of the claims examiners, it was 77 was the improvement for the claims examiners. And then when you annualize it, the monetary benefit was 386,232. So that's your productivity. And again, it's annualized. So we take the unit of measure, convert it to money, and then extrapolate over the number of claims processors and the number of claims examiners for the number of days they work in a year. Office expense, you see office expense for those in the company office was 17,000. Office expense for those working at home was 12,005. The difference is 4,500 for the first year. When we multiply that times the number of people working at home, that 311, the total cost savings was 1,399,000. And then the cost of turnover was 25,400. So one turnover statistic using standard value, 25,400. The reduction was 41. Turnovers for the year, that's 1,041,000. And then the cost of going remote, these are all the costs that went into the remote strategy. It was almost $1 million to go remote. So to build those offices, to get people in a position where they could actually perform and perform well, was $991. And then when we look at the ROI, we take project benefits of 3.9 million compared to the 991. That's going to give us a BCR of 3.99 and an ROI of 299. Now, prior to the program, as they were talking about investing in this remote work, they did run a forecast, and they had a forecast of 165. So the 299 far exceeded that. The target, the minimally accepted ROI was 25%. So you have a forecast. Forecast is a forecast. It's not a target. The forecast was 165. What the senior executive said, if we get enough benefit that exceeds cost, minimally acceptable 25% return, then we will talk about rolling this out to the others. So the ROI was actually substantially higher than the target. But in terms of the intangibles, and this was interesting to them, the whole thing was interesting to senior leaders, but what was really interesting was that, of course, commuting time, which takes a lot of stress off the employees, but also the impact to the environment. So fuel consumption, and then when you look at fuel consumption and convert that to carbon emissions, it was a pretty big environmental impact. And then some other intangibles here. And the intangibles are those measures we choose not to convert to money. Sometimes even had the work at home been less than 25% with the intangibles, it could have been enough to move forward with it, with the program. So these were just some of the lessons learned. And the lesson was, yes, remote work can pay off. When we compare the benefits to the cost, it can pay off, but we've got to get buy-in from both parties, the employees and the managers, and everyone has to come together to understand what are the rules, what are the policies, what are the procedures, what are the boundaries and the parameters, and then also have the capability, put people through some training on how we're going to make this thing work and the skills necessary to make it work. So if we're monitoring systems and calendars, employees need to know what that looks like and how we're using it and what does that mean. Managers need to know how to manage people who work remotely to make it work. So in ensuring everyone is bought in not only to the process, but also those specific expectations. And then finally, it's a process, right? We've got to continue measuring and monitoring along the way. So these were the lessons that they learned. So that's the case study. These are just some next steps for you guys if you want it. And for those who want the resources, here's the QR code. So hopefully that gave you something to think about in terms of demonstrating the ROI of remote work. And again, it was just one case study, very isolated case study, but very important to the organization who implemented it. So thanks so much. So Dr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Patty, for providing us insight into applying ROI to remote work, which I'm sure most people had never heard of, and now they're very much aware, and also providing the resources for people to learn more about it.
My pleasure.
I think we move on to NYU, and we have members of the Human Capital Analytics research team from NYU Tandon have been presenting at this conference for the last 7 years. This interdisciplinary research team this year includes students participating in a project in the Human Capital Analytics Lab at NYU Tandon. The presentation of the NYU research team will focus on a deep dive into remote job ads and what do the analytics tell us. And members of the team include Professor Squires, who is a clinical professor and director of the IO program at the NYU Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And then we have a number of students who are involved with it. This team, from the very beginning, this team included Catalina Jaramillo, who was a graduate research fellow, research student at one time in the Department of Computer Science. And she's now completing her Ph.D. and now working for PwC in machine learning. And the students, other students she's a PhD student. We have some number of master students, including Joanna Chen, who's an MS student in Management of Technology at NYU Tandon, and several students at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences in IO Psychology. These include Isha Tariq, Deepali Vitra and Dennis Wang. So some of them will be presenting, and we have a number of people who will be participating from this group. So NYU team, you're on. I think Professor Squires may do the lead off on here.
I will, Hal, thank you. So let me just do a little bit more introduction, and I'll turn it over to the team who's done all the hard work on this research. First, thanks, Hal. This is the 12th successful program that you've been responsible for, and we've been fortunate to be part of 7 of them, but I know you've done a great deal of work to make this great program, this great conference happen every year. Thank you. As you said, this is an interdisciplinary team where students who are in the Tandon School of Engineering, studying management of technology, computer science, get together with industrial psychologists from the Graduate School of Art and Science. And we have very large sets of data, a variety of types of data, where the students get to work on these projects together. And Dr. Kaufman, myself, Catalina, were among the people who started this lab a number of years ago. And we're glad to see that all the great work that's been done. The students are able to get great, they're all interested in AI and machine learning applied to these kinds of problems. So that's the kinds of projects they do. They're able to do a master's thesis. They provide research support to organizations that provide us data. And of course, they develop some great technical skills for their future careers. There's quite a lot of types of data we have. What you'll hear about today is work that was done on millions of job ads about remote work and non-remote work. And as Hal said, Joanna, Dennis, Deepali, and Isha, who you'll hear from now, have done a great job of analyzing these millions of job ads and finding some really interesting trends, which, having listened to the talks today, there are some really nice connections. So with that, Dennis, I think you're going to be leading it off.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Squires. And I am Dennis. I'm very excited here today to share you with some insights from our research on remote working, but from a slightly different perspective, job ads or job postings. We're in the midst of the biggest remote working experiment in history. And of course, this is not something we have chosen. Things are not going back to what they were. We now have these vaccines for the virus. And since we have created these new possibilities with the human beings inside organizations are having new perspective of how they want to work. And we have learned a lot as a result of that. So a quick recap of working remotely. Next slide, please. Which offer many benefits such as the reduced commute, flexible schedules, and at great ease at things like managing doctor appointments and family obligations. And also for employers such as access to a larger talent pool. People really want these remote opportunities. And yes, well, there are many benefits and it also presents challenges. For example, productivity, and remote workers also have less or no time in person with their managers and colleagues to have casual conversation and interactions. These are acting as a social buffer against work stress or burnout. So some companies want their employees to come back to the office now, yet some have grown attached to these perks of remote working and are very reluctant to give them up. Many companies such as Amazon and Starbucks have faced pushbacks from employees after announcing their more strict return to office policies. So how can organizations continue to offer things like these perks that people really want alongside to address the challenges in the post-pandemic era? And on the other hand, the Great Resignation following massive layoffs in the tech industry started spreading more widely. And these cuts paired with continued uncertainty about the economy and the future of work have also let people understandably skittish. So in light of the growing interest and importance of remote working, our team decided to take a closer look at this topic from a job ads perspective. We have analyzed a large data set of job ads with a focus on remote job postings to uncover trends and patterns in remote job opportunities. And by examining these characteristics and requirements of these remote jobs, we aim to gain insights into the evolving landscape of remote work and to also provide professionals and practitioners with these useful information and possibly help you adapt to these changes. And big thanks to Canogram, our data source, which the data set comes from Direct Employers, a nonprofit organization that belongs to the National Labor Exchange. And these raw job postings are first collected and then processed by Canogram, who adds the metadata such as the job titles, skills, and industry codes. And the data is tracked daily from January 2020 to January 23, and includes only job posting from direct employers. So these are postings that actually exist. And moving on to the first and foremost, the time series plot about the US job market, including all of the jobs. So this graph shows the number of all of the job openings in the US from May 2019 to January 2023. As you can see, the number of openings was relatively stable before and until when the COVID-19 pandemic led to a significant dip. And however, as the pandemic receded and the economy began to recover, job openings started to rise even higher, doubling at mid-2022. And since then, the number of all job openings has started to decline again, indicating a potential shift in the job market. Let's take a look at the next graph that shows the number of remote job openings in the US, where we have this pinkish line as the number of job openings, and the green one as the percentage of all jobs. So we see this trend of remote jobs is somewhat similar, but slightly different to the total job openings. In fact, the percentage of remote job openings increased by over 7 times from less than 1% to a peak around 3.5% of all job postings in mid-2022. That's a pretty big jump, and since it actually benefited from the pandemic and started to rise earlier and more quickly compared to total jobs. Yes, we can all see this remote job are visibly decreasing after the peak, and perhaps due to many outside economical factors and the resignation and layoffs. But we should not necessarily see this decline as a negative trend, but rather as a sign that the market is maturing and stabilizing. And companies may be shifting towards hybrid or in-person work models. The question here is, how can we use this information to stay ahead of this curve and create effective strategies that benefit both the company and the workforce? So our forecasting analysis used Meta's profit model. We chose this model among others because it's based on Bayesian framework. It provides us very fast, well accurate, and reliable predictions. It also takes into account of all the seasonal fluctuations, trends, and any extra regressors such as special events and the COVID meltdown and all the layoffs. And thus, we can better understand the patterns and trends that have emerged in remote working and make more informed decisions. Moving on to our prediction model. So are remote jobs going to have an end? Although this forecasting model predicts that the remote job openings will eventually decline and return to the pre-pandemic levels, it remains a question whether remote work will become a norm in the future. We've seen the benefits and flexibility of remote work, which have been highly valued by both employees and employers during the pandemic and now, of course, and the outside factors such as the economical conditions and the shifting employer policies may impact the future of remote work, but I am very optimistic, and I believe that remote work will remain an important option for many industries going forward. So thank you again, and I will hand it over to Deepali to tell you more deeper about our analysis into these job ads.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Hi, everyone. I'm Deepali, and I'll be focusing on a detailed analysis about where these remote jobs are going. So as you heard from Dennis, that the forecasting model from Meta, profit model, predicts that the number of remote jobs over this year is going to decrease. And that made us wonder, let's find out where these remote jobs are going. So we did an analysis by industry. So the data from Canogram provides a NAICS code for each job ad, which is given by the employer themselves, which indicates the industry with which the job ad applies to. And we did a classification of these NAICS codes into knowledge and service industry using these NAICS codes. Next slide. Yeah. The knowledge industry consisted of these 4 sub-industries: finance and insurance, information, which is IT industry, management of companies, and professional, scientific, and technical services. So these industries comprised of all knowledge workers, and the above mentioned NAICS codes were used to create this industry category. The service industry consisted of accommodation and food services, educational services, and healthcare and social assistance. So these were service workers, and these NAICS codes were used to create this category. Now let's find out what were the trends in the knowledge and service industry in terms of remote jobs. Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, so as you can see, so there are 2 very interesting findings here. As you can see, the dark blue line, which indicates the service industry, these are the percentage of remote jobs that were there in the entire service industry. And what's interesting here is that despite COVID pandemic, the percentage of service industry job remained below 2%. So these are jobs, this indicates that these are the kind of jobs which will consistently, despite of the pandemic, demand in-person work. Now, what's also interesting is that the percentage of remote jobs increased for the knowledge industry gradually. There was a time by the end of 2022, when 98% of jobs in the knowledge industry were remote. And that's very interesting. But as you can see, the moment we flip to or we move into 2023, there's a very, very sharp decline of remote jobs in the knowledge industry. And as mentioned here, we can see a 45% drop in the knowledge industry remote jobs. So we decided to do a forecasting analysis to understand what are the future trends for remote jobs in both of these industries. Next slide, Joan. Yeah. So as you can see, these are some very surprising predictions made by our model. So the model predicts that by June 15 of this year, there might be a 79% drop in remote jobs in the knowledge industry. In comparison, there's only a 6% drop in the service industry. Something that's important to note here is that the base rates are different, or the base rates are different for service industry and knowledge industry. So there were a lot more knowledge industry remote jobs compared to service industry remote jobs, which we've already discussed. And I'm sure all of you are wondering that that's so obvious, right? Because of the tech layoffs that happened just at the end of last year, and by 2023, we all assume that knowledge industry jobs are going because this is the industry that keeps tech workers. So we decided to check if the same trend is observed in regular jobs and remote jobs in the knowledge industry. And as you can see here, that these results were quite surprising for us too, that while there is a very steep decline in remote jobs in the knowledge industry, the same decline is not being predicted for regular jobs in the knowledge industry. So that means that if you are a knowledge worker in the tech industry, in the finance industry, or a professional worker, finding a remote job would be more difficult in the coming months compared to finding a regular job for knowledge workers. And so we come to the conclusion that in addition, or even after adjusting for the tech layoffs that have happened the past few months, remote jobs are consistently declining. And one of the reasons largely could be that more and more companies are shifting to hybrid. So a job posting that was being advertised as remote software engineer or remote financial analyst might be being advertised as just financial analyst or hybrid financial analyst. And that's what we speculate, right? My friend Isha will be discussing the details of how these numbers are affected and the specifics of these industries next. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dipali. So as Dipali said, there's something to be observed in terms of remote jobs within each of these sectors. And we'll do a deeper dive into each of the knowledge and service sectors to see what is driving the declining trends. So within the knowledge sector, we can see a sharp decline at the beginning of 2022 in the management of companies industry, which is the bluish line over here. And after observing what kind of remote job titles are in this industry, we found that the decline was very sharp in roles such as remote data engineer, remote market specialist, remote risk manager, strategist, and a few other remote roles. And I think someone asked in the chat, like, does remote work include hybrid? From what we understand, these are just the titles are have the word remote in them, so we are assuming these are purely remote roles for now. One possible reason for this decline in management of companies is that roles, as Dipali mentioned as well, that were previously advertised as remote are now hybrid. So for example, a remote data engineer role is simply advertised as data engineer now, and is expected to have some in-person activities. Some jobs do remain remote in this industry, such as analysts and researchers, as they might not require as much collaboration as the other roles. Then moving on to the three other industries in this sector, which are, no, the previous slide, please. Thank you. So moving on to the other three industries within this sector, which are finance and insurance, information and professional, scientific and technical services, we see a more stable rising trend and then drop-offs in late 2022, early 2023. In finance and insurance, which is the green line here, the rise is coming from remote business analyst roles, increasing considerably. While in the information sector, which is the orange line below, we saw a spike in remote software engineer roles until around August 2022, after which there was a sharp drop and now a steady decline. Similarly, professional, scientific, and technical services industry, which is the pink line over here, we saw a sharp spike and then a decline in remote software developer roles. These roles were causing the increasing trends we see in these two industries, and then the sudden dips that signal that we are entering the world of hybrid in these industries as well. So in general, we do know that software development and engineering type of roles are still very much in demand, but are now moving to hybrid variations. That's because these roles might seem like technical individual contributors on paper, but in reality, their work is becoming increasingly cross-functional, necessitating hybrid work, particularly in the knowledge industry. Hybrid roles demand different communication and management skills than what employees have become accustomed to in remote work, particularly Gen Z, who have primarily just worked remotely. So we need to prepare our workforce and managers for this change. Moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in the service industry, we witness an increase in remote jobs, specifically within the healthcare industry, the blue line here, which is interesting because healthcare does not have a lot of remote opportunities. So we do notice, of course, that the percentage is very small, less than 2%. We do see here that post-pandemic, these percentage of remote jobs in healthcare did not decline, therefore not moving into hybrid or in-person roles as much. Doing a deeper dive, we saw that this particular role of remote medical coders, these are the roles that are having this increase and then this consistently like high level of remote jobs within this healthcare industry. It would also be wise to keep such jobs remote because they can be done from home to protect them from unnecessary exposure. And this is such a role that can be entirely at home, and due to the increase of patients, the burden on the healthcare industry was already a lot. So it made sense to keep them remote for now. We also see that educational services and accommodation and food services sectors, which are the lines at the bottom, they remain relatively stable even during the pandemic and do not have very high percentage of remote jobs. As a result, there's not much of interest for those who are looking for remote work in these particular areas. Moving on to the next slide. We also tried to observe remote job ads by state. After just plotting the percentage of remote jobs, we see that the relatively densely populated states here, which are bunched together at the bottom of the graph, seem to have less variance in this percentage of remote jobs. And these states are, for example, Colorado, New York, Texas, California, and Florida. Meanwhile, relatively less densely populated states, which are the ones that have the increasing trend, they have a higher variance in percentage. And these states include Wyoming, Alaska, North Dakota, Vermont, and Rhode Island. It's an interesting distinction, but we don't know exactly what is causing it. We have some guesses. For example, we believe that densely populated states have a wide range of types of jobs overall, and the proportion of remote jobs stays relatively low and stable because of the presence of physical offices enabling more hybrid and in-person opportunities. On the other hand, the less densely populated states might have more remote jobs advertised to attract the talent they know that is there, but might be unwilling to relocate for a job just to attend office for 1 to 2 days a week. And the pandemic proved that remote work is possible. So more and more people are not willing to leave their hometowns. For employers, it's important to consider, even in densely populated states, does the job really need an in-person component, and to what extent? Just because there is an office doesn't mean an employee needs to be there. And a lot of operational cost savings come into this if in-person is not required. And for employees, it might be harder to find a purely remote role if they're in a densely populated state. Now I'll hand it over to Joanna to talk more about what remote job employers require from employees.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about how the remote jobs demands on what's their requirements. So first thing to talk about is the degree requirements. People usually think that degrees will affect when they are finding jobs, or some people think that it is more important when it comes to remote jobs. However, the data shows that the difference of percentage of the job counts based on the degree is small, and it really affects little. Through this time plot and timeline plot, this line really does not change over time, and it is really, really flat on like every line here, and which indicates that both remote and non-remote jobs count does not really change due to degree requirements. And this slide shows that the tree maps of the requirement in degree of the remote jobs versus the non-remote jobs. To clarify that, all the blocks here add up to 100%, and the level of subject degrees is not specified, which means that people who has this kind of subject degrees may only go find like specific jobs that requires these degrees. In these two graphs, remote jobs require more Ph.D. degrees more than the non-remote jobs. So that is on the right upper side of both graphs, and that non-remote jobs requires a bit more subject degree, which is the orange in both graphs, and that non-remote jobs requires more subject degree than remote jobs. And so previous slide shows the requirements of the degree, and this slide shows the certification requirements on the job ads or like job posting. And there are some interesting findings. So the block for the technology certifications, which is the green block on the left side and the orange block on the right side. The remote jobs has a bigger block than the non-remote jobs, which means that remote work would require a higher percentage for technology certifications than the non-remote jobs, which indicates that technology worlds or the technology job openings may have a higher percentage of the remote jobs, which also matches the previous industry analysis. On the other hand, non-remote jobs requires less technology certifications, but requires a more healthcare certifications. Part of the medical jobs like doctors or nurses, they do not have the remote job concept. So all that fits the thought of healthcare certifications has a higher percentage on the non-remote jobs. And this following slide shows the skills requirements. And it's also shown by remotes versus non-remotes. From the size of the block show, project management seems to have been a required in all jobs, and that remote jobs requires more programming language skills, which also matches the previous certification requirements findings that technology jobs has a more remote job percentage. And we will see the timeline changes in this next slide. This is a graph that shows how skills and technology changes over time. And we found that technical skills requirements do not really change a lot over time. In this finding, we're guessing that what is more important is really about the managing technology and managing people. So there will be questions or concerns that people think the technology is changing over time. But the data shows the consistency of the stability of these core skills, like these SQL, Python, Java, C#, something like this. These are the core skills that does not change over time, or say that they really change really small. And although there are many new technologies such as like Web3 or AI, yet we rarely see that companies would say that we only require AI in engineer, or they say we only want AI people in the job descriptions. And that this supports that these core skills, the Python or these programming skills, are not really changing over time demonstration, even that there are more new tech coming in. So back to our question. So are remote jobs coming to an end? The answer is like yes and no. So based on different industries. Yes to those management of companies and the enterprises, or the part of technology positions that requires like more communication. In this case, it shows that most jobs that requires communications shift back from remote to in-person, or remote to a hybrid. So that communication will be smoother and make their work progress faster, since they will have to meet in person time to time. And now to the information and the healthcare industry. And there are different reasons based on the healthcare industry. First is because like the doctors or the nurses, they do not have this work online, or they work in person from the past, even in the pandemic. So it is nonsense to say that whether they're coming to an end or not. Another part is the medical coder. Their patients are rising, so they still work remotely. So both reasons are no to the remote jobs coming to an end, but a different reasons. So as an employee, if you are finding a remote job, it's possible you'll find like informations or other job that requires less communication or something like that. And if you are an employer, you can try to break up your work job description and to attract the right talent people. And this might reduce the operation costs. Overall, remote jobs may seem declining in counts, yet it is not an end. Also, we are assuming that it will be shifting back to hybrid rather than like regular non-remote jobs. This is our finding in the projects. Thank you for all your listening, and feel free to ask any questions. Back to Dr. Kaufman or
Okay, I want to thank you, Dr. Squires and Joanna, Isha, Deepali, and Dennis for providing a better understanding of where the future of remote work is going. Looking forward to future results with your very pioneering work, and hopefully we'll get some publications in the future out of what you're doing, because it really is something that I don't think others are doing at all. In any case, we'll look forward to future work from the team. Before we go on to the final segment of today's conference, I would like to recognize the conference team members who are executive board members of the Tech Firm Student Chapter at NYU Tandon. The co-president, Howard Hong, was the conference coordinator. And you've been hearing a lot from Howard. I want to thank him very much personally. Vice President Cindy Pang, who's there in the background. The Secretary Priyak Kundu, who's also a co-coordinator with Howard. And the various vice presidents, including the technology support, Joanna Chen, who you just heard reporting in the last presentation, and Vice President for Strategy, Venkat Goyala. Without their ongoing tech support, dedication, and critical contributions, this conference could not have taken place. So I'd like to give all of them a virtual applause. I can applaud, you can hear me, okay? And anyway, they deserve all the applause that you can give them. I don't know if we can hear other people, but I give them my applause. Okay, now we move on. The executive board, furthermore, the executive board in general, of this award-winning Textron chapter at NYU Tandon helped organize many valuable professional career-related events for students, including very successful people analytics related activities, as well as networking and mentoring events depicted in some of the photos that you see on the slide. One of the recent chapter presidents created a 1-minute video that promoted Textron and people analytics, which I would like to share with you now.
Hi, we are Textron, an innovative and award-winning chapter of the Society of Human Resource Management, aiming to provide resources for professional development for students. We focus on cutting-edge research in the field of people analytics. This year, we won the Outstanding Student Chapter Award, the highest recognition a student chapter could earn nationally. So what is people analytics? We all know that today, with the revolution of the quantified cell, we are able to track anything and everything. We are seeing an influx of data and devices inside organizations and an emergence of a new field now known as people analytics. This is a fascinating area for organizations around the world because a lot of the decisions of the past were made around human-centric functions and based on intuition. Today, with the help of data, organizations are able to tap into understanding things such as what do successful leaders in an organization do? What are the key qualities that make up an amazing team? If you want to learn more and unleash the power of data, come join us at Textron.
Okay, beautiful video, short and sweet and quite creative. Okay, so anyway, again, thank you to all the Textron members who were involved with this and other activities over the years, actually. Now, on to the finale of our conference, which is our most exciting segment, the panel discussion plus the Q&A with all presenters. But first, we'll start with the discussant, Dr. Vincent Conti, who is a managing partner at WorkLife LLC, as well as an adjunct professor in the Department of Technology Management and Innovation at NYU Tandon. He teaches courses in our People Analytics track. In this capstone session of the conference, the key issues addressed will be summarized by our discussant, and then the floor is yours, Professor Conti.
Okay, so I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes.
I just want to be so bold as to take just a few seconds to say thank you to Hal Kaufman. He is the soul of this program, and he has done so much for the students of Tandon. And I think we owe him a great debt of gratitude that he continues this work and pulling people together and making this happen. So thank you, Hal. In terms of questions that normally when we have this live, we have a buffet after, and that guarantees that some people will stay even longer because they know there's going to be food. But we don't have that inducement here today. So I want to throw out a question to our panel. All those of you who've shared your knowledge so far in the program, we talk about work-life balance, but like everything else, there are winners and losers. And I was wondering if any of you have some findings related to who seem to be the winners and losers in the work-life balance situation because of remote work. Are there particular situations or scenarios that give certain people some particular benefits and certain other people some disadvantages. I'll just throw that out to the panel in general. Didn't like the question? Okay, go ahead, Robin.
Hi, Dr. Conte. This is Robin, and I'll just comment here. I do believe that there are winners and losers when it comes to work-life balance. I think that part of what we have to be thinking about, though, is the indomitable spirit of humans, because 3 years ago, we were all faced with, or many of us were faced with either being a lockdown, being an essential person, working remotely, or actually having our organization shuttered during a lockdown. That was very much reality. Students, had to be, everyone, as many people who could be were remote. That started 3 years ago, and we adapted, right? We had to adapt. Many of us had to adapt, and we've seen that there's still a large number of people working remotely. But I do think that there are trade-offs for work-life balance. I think somebody is going to write a Ph.D. dissertation about the effects of a commute for ramping up on the way to work and ramping down on the way home, for a separation between work and personal life. If somebody hasn't started already, I think it would be fascinating. When you sit at your dining room table and you work remotely, I think it's easier to work more, and we have the technology to work all the time. So that was one of the reasons why I suggested that we do need to be looking at burnout. 48% of Gen Zers, according to a Deloitte study, report being anxious or depressed all the time. And that's just the Gen Z population. So I do think that burnout is a big issue. I think that's why organizations have to have some boundaries in place. So I'll start it, and anyone else can jump in and agree or disagree with me.
Anyone else?
I can speak a little bit from our Microsoft perspective as well. So there are definitely trade-offs when it comes to work-life balance and the pros and cons. And similar to what Dr. Erickson said, that the commute time was huge. And as employees were working from home, we're just like, oh, productivity is at its peak because now the commute time is getting filled with meetings. So yes, productivity is at its peak because employees are spending a lot more time. So setting those boundaries, at least in the corporate setting, that has been a very much priority for us, that how do managers push the employees to set the boundaries to help with work-life balance. And I don't think this is going to be something that can be solved relatively quickly. It's going to be something that we're going to study over years, and this is going to be shaping the new hybrid way of working is the future of work, at least in my mind. But there will be a lot of trials and errors that we will see during the process to make it successful.
Anyone else?
I might add from kind of a work design issue, I think it will take quite some time to figure out what components of work can be done remotely, what components of work need to be done hybrid or in person. And we have some insights into that. I think you heard about some of them from many of the speakers today, but I don't think we're there yet. And that will help sort out the winners and losers too. And maybe hopefully make more winners.
Okay. Last call before we move on to the next question. Okay. Stephen Howard, who's one of our participants, poses a question to the panel. Do the panelists believe that organizations are adequately equipping frontline managers to lead remote or hybrid teams?
I can go since I talked a little bit about manager support here. That is something that is on top of mind for us. Frontline managers are the ones who are being most impacted from our lens who are leading teams and working across different time zones. Of course, leaders are as well, but frontline managers who are managing ICs are doing a lot more heavy lifting. There all this research, doing the research versus getting it actually into the hands of managers and them knowing what are the best practices is also the key. So those are some of the things that we are very much focused on, but some of the other companies are looking more for people who are on this panel to share the insights more broadly, so they can actually leverage and share the best practices in their companies as well.
Anyone else? Okay, let me move on. How about personality and competencies? Are some people better at doing remote work than others? And how does that find its way into screening certain types of personalities in the hiring process or the assessment process? To what extent are we paying attention to personality and competencies when we deal with people doing remote work?
I like that question. It's a really good question. How does it impact personnel selection? And again, I'll go back to until you understand what the job requirements are, you can't really specify what the screening requirements are. And so right now it's kind of a guess, best guess, and it will take some time to figure out what are the work requirements, distinct work requirements, so that you can figure out what are the distinct selection requirements to match up people to be successful. But at the very least, the in-person kinds of skill, the interpersonal kinds of skills seem to need to be in person or hybrid at the very least. So that would suggest that those who have those good skills in that regard will not be good candidates for remote.
I would also add to that, that I think we also have to figure out, in addition to training managers, like Maria was saying, that they're the most impacted. I think we also have to be training employees, because the way you get to know your colleagues in the past, when we primarily didn't have as much remote work, was by meeting for lunch or running into each other in the break room, or a birthday cake for so-and-so or whatever that was. It was a very informal. And I think when you have predominantly remote workers or people who are doing both, you have to plan more. But I also think that you need to learn how to get to know people in a different way, which I do think that we need to have training for both managers and employees for how are you successful? How are you a successful employee in a hybrid role? I think it's important to sort of understand the differences between how you get to know people and how you bond, or you get to know their skills and their competencies as well. So I would just add to that by saying I think that it's something that has to be thought about.
I want to also share some perspective on this ones, and maybe beyond the specific questions around personality and individual traits, into the broader HR practice, and the HR practice that matters from a talent acquisitions to talent development, performance management, attrition management, and all of that, into the traditional physical world that now we're facing. How do we apply those HR practices into the digital world? And Accenture, we have a proof of concept towards what is the digital twins. You have your physical employees, but you also have your digital versions of your employees in the digital context. And all the best practice that we have been already applied in the HR practice regarding of how do you use the valid assessment to evaluate and select the best candidates should be applied, into the same way, compared to the physical world as well as the digital worlds. In a way, it's the same. It's the same applications towards, when we talk about personality, and a certain personality would lead to, if we found out certain personality would lead to a better working remote, does that apply with the ethics? And, do we, like, if we also find out, certain gender groups or ethnicity groups associated with the personality, associated with, individual, characteristics, and if the findings exist in there, how we're able to ensure we apply the right kind of HR practice and into those different, dimensions in a way. So I would say it's an emerging domains, and all the practice that we have been, learning and use as best practice in this field. Now we need to rethink about all the different data points and applications in the tradition HR domains towards the digital domains, and revalidate some of those practices in a way, not only just limited to certain personalities.
Anybody else?
I
So
really
yeah,
like
go
that
ahead.
question. Oh, sorry. I really like that question. But going back to one of the comments that I heard before, I think right now we're still trying to figure out what are the best jobs or skills that are done in person versus remote. I think once we have a good understanding of those, then the next thing would become which are the people who are more successful and doing a study. I think some of it also depends on personality and how people thrive, and also on people's career stages. Someone who is coming right out of university, for instance, or is early in career, might have a more need of connecting in person with different employees, learning from people, or at least getting acclimated to the corporate environment, versus someone who's more tenured, knows the rhythm, and now it's about doing that job. So I think there's a lot more that we have to think through as we do more research in this area.
So there used to be things like the grapevine and the water cooler and the other ways that we informally connected with people. And we didn't necessarily have to know who those people were. We passed them in the hallway every day. And maybe we just started our job 2 months ago and we're getting to know everybody in the office. What's the substitute for that now? I mean, if you're doing remote work, and you're walking into a new organization, you really don't know a lot of people. You need mentors, you need access to informal information. What's filling the gap, at least temporarily now, until organizations kind of catch up and create new systems to make that happen? Is that a TBD? Is that we lost you, Kanti? What are you talking about? I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. So
so I can provide some Accenture's point of views, and then I think I introduced a little bit in our best practice or lessons learned sessions around that omni-connected culture in a way. So one of the fundamentals, associated with the omni-connected is how we're able to ensure, while we're having this hybrid approach, how we're able to ensure that in-person connections in a way. Some of those practices that we have been applied with the clients is really associated with you treat your you treat the office or on-site requirement as a business trip. So it used to be, require you to come in 4 days a week, 3 days a week. You say, hey, I need to go to the office as how I schedule a business trip from this state to that state. Now it's only like from my homes to the same states and into the office. There is a purpose component into it. Why I'm going there, for what purpose, and therefore, this is also related to the organization's new ways of working towards how should we, design the office in a way so it's no longer a cubicle after cubicle, but more meeting rooms. And therefore, we're able to hosting those in-person meeting, maybe large scale in-person meetings in a more convenient approach. Some of the other, rethinkings towards the the overlayings of the office, real estate planning is, instead of have a one centralized large office, how about you have a satellite office like a hoteling that enable people to connecting more often in their local neighborhood. So those were the some of the good practice that companies has been using to ensure that we provided those enablement for people to create those in-person meetings for purpose.
We got a comment from Peggy Saldana saying that autonomy and trust for management are crucial to hybrid work to be successful. That theme has kind of come up in a lot of the presentations and the research that you've. What are you seeing happening to try to foster more trust and to give people an opportunity to demonstrate their autonomy so that they can kind of develop into the type of people who can handle that autonomy? What's going on? Not just in terms of formal programs or HR encouraged initiatives, but do you see anything, even just on a personal basis, that's working towards encouraging autonomy and building trust?
We're seeing, and it's always been there, but we're seeing it more with remote workers. And the engagement with managers is clarity of expectations. So really defining the work and the outcomes of the work. So clarity of expectations, and then recognition of the achievement of those expectations, but also recognition of the support employees are getting from their management to achieve those expectations.
Anything else? Yeah.
I'll just add that without trust, remote work doesn't work. Because if managers don't trust that their employees are accomplishing what they're supposed to, if leaders don't trust, then you won't be able to be effective. Nobody can be effective, right? The leaders are unhappy and they're pushing for people to go back to the office because they can't see them. The horror stories all hit the media about the person who's doing 3 jobs because they're using ChatGPT to get them all done, or they're not showing up. In fact, I think I saw a headline the other day that half of the workers didn't open up their laptops during April. Well, I'd really love to know what their managers were doing. But anyway, the media will write the most scandalous things, and then there's this, and then it's up to folks and very thoughtful groups like this one to say, hey, wait a minute. Just so you guys know, and Patty and I are actually working together on a report that we're going to look at the ROI of hybrid work. And how do we do that with real numbers, right? Because in the reimagined workplace, we asked HR leaders whether or not productivity had increased or decreased since before the pandemic. And we kept saying that productivity had increased. Again, no commute, people working more hours. Where could you go when there was a lockdown? You couldn't. Some organizations were afraid they wouldn't make it. And so people put in extra effort. So anyway, I just wanted to add that I think trust is incredibly important. And I think it's also something that employers can be asking their employees about.
But one of the things you hear about is employee surveillance. And I think Maria was kind of getting to that in her presentation and talking about the ethics, if you will, of what kinds of questions you ask people and how you track the data. I think one of the statements you made was, we look at things more correlationally rather than try to be predictive. And I think that kind of, what that said to me was, we're not surveilling people and trying to figure out how to manage them through data. We're trying to understand and make connections. So how do we convince people that we're doing that? I mean, I think that's the right thing, and it makes a lot of sense, but people, people think that they're being surveilled even when they're not, or people think that there's an algorithm pointing a gun at their head that's going to help them lose their job when there's a layoff. So how do we go the extra distance? And I think Dennis had a hand up, and I'm not sure whether he was answering a question or trying to get my attention.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask the same question. So I was wondering, how can remote workers be monitored, as these tools like video feeds and keystrokes monitoring software are, more often seen after the COVID-19 pandemic. And actually some of my friends were reported to have, these keystroke monitoring softwares installed in their work computer. And I was thinking, how should companies or HR professionals balance the monitoring and the employee privacy rights?
So in the case study that I presented, that was part of the process, and it was all education. And so both parties, managers and the employees, came together to understand exactly what that process looked like, what monitoring looked like, how the data were being used, why it's important, and why it's helpful to the employees and to the managers to ensure that the employees got the most out of their remote work. Not only get out the most in terms of productivity to the company, but also work-life balance and all the things that the employees wanted as well. So it began with an understanding of what that monitoring looked like, how the data were being used, and what the benefit to them was. I know that seems a little simplistic, but it seemed to work in this particular case study that I described to you earlier.
Maria?
Thank you. Yeah.
Plus one to that. I think transparency is the key here for us. For instance, our employee signal survey or any of our surveys, it's very clearly stated, big and bold, that it's a confidential survey and not an anonymous survey. But employees also have that confidence that the survey is only monitored at an aggregated level, and who has access, what type of data anybody has access is very clearly communicated to the employees. Another thing for us to understand is what is being monitored and why is it being monitored. So as in terms of people analytics, when we think about it, we always say we do not care about policing employees. Anyone can work from wherever they want, but what do we do to make them successful in the way of working that works best for them, regardless of if it's in office, if it's from home. So that is the type of information or analytics that we typically do. And again, being transparent and the data that we are using. It can, I was pretty surprised when I heard in the beginning of the conversation about JP Morgan and using, employee attendance data for rewards, because that is where things get a little tricky. But again, if that works for JP Morgan and them communicating it out to the employees and employees are okay, then, again, transparency is the key.
I want to echo on that. So some of the project and a case, the examples and we provided here early, and there's a big components that we call as change management, or as a transformation effort, or as adapted to the new ways of working, and all of that as a ways to emphasize it's a journey for the organizations to adapt towards to the future. So therefore, the change management is a very important component on how to educate the whole organizations going towards, to adapt it to the future. And that were including communication, that were including learnings, that were including, the clear definitions towards the decision and authorities and definition of policies. And all of that is integrated into together to ultimately equip employees as well as managers to adapt it to the new ways of working. So just want to echo to that, and as approach when we go ahead provided those services back to our, organizations to see, hey, this is a new ways of working. It's less around, hey, let's switch this technology so you people can talk to each other. Or, let's get all people back, or, let people work on what, on a remote, whatever policies that the organizations may adapt based on the needs. There's a strong change management component need to go along with it, so people know what's really going on, what is the purpose, why they were doing it, and what its impacted to my life, and associated with the rewards, associated with my PTOs, and all of that. So therefore, we're seeing the whole organizations were able to successfully adapt it to this new ways of working. If we're lacking any of those dimensions, it will come back, into the organization cultures in a negative way.
You guys are all involved in research, third-party research, direct research with employees, keeping your ear to the ground. My sense is that given that we're kind of in a down cycle, or we don't even know that we're in a down cycle, in years past, when things were great and business was good, we're hiring, we're adding new capabilities, we're getting into adventures. And then when money gets tight and the market gets a little squirrely, then people start to get laid off. And now all of a sudden people look around and they say, well, when's the other shoe going to drop? Is it going to be me next? And a lot of that, when I worked at Accenture for a few years, a lot of that is around, change management. But a lot of it also is what we've been talking about for years, which is as new technologies come on board, people start to measure themselves against the technology and see whether or not they fit in the new reality. What are you perceiving, or what are your sensors telling you about the state of the workforce today, and how that's affecting their ability to function?
So if I take this as a questions, but link that back to another very important, I would say, initiatives or organizations' missions that these days that we have been helping a lot of clients to address. And if you recall, when I said, the future of work, there's the first one is purpose, there's leaders, there's employee experience. The last one is really around that digital capabilities or digital skills. And a lot of the effort, along with the change management, what we do to help clients is really to help upskill their employees to adapt to the technology development in a way. And oftentimes, and we have been saying that organizations see the business impact, the business values of the technology, and they spend a huge amount of effort to integrate the technology into the business systems, but there's not enough emphasis to upskill their people to adapt it to the technology-enabled digital ways of working. So because of that challenge, along with oftentimes people thinking, there's a general thinking about when there's a new technology get introduced, that means that I will lose my job. So for example, when ChatGPT, for this year, it's a hot topic for this year, when ChatGPTs get, become popular, a lot of the, one of the shoemaking organizations and the clients were saying, oh my God. So, all the designers were saying, I will lose my job because, ChatGPTs can generate, hundreds, thousands designing, I have to do it. I'm only able to pull out 10, even though I don't think what they do is as good as humans would do. So what we're taking on this is less around when you introduce new technology and this many people will lose their job. It never the case. It's more around how you upscale your workforce that you currently have to adapt it to the new technology. The reasons for that is, given how new technology has been, evolved so quickly, it's very hard to find the perfect talent quickly and in large scales to enable those transformations, like digital transformations for a lot of organizations. So therefore, many organizations have taken the approach as upscaling their own employees versus, hey, get rid of big chunk of them and let the technology, do the work, or hire a bunch of new talent. So that has been a common trend we have been observing towards that. With that said, is from an employee's point of view, there's another important component. It's associated with how we're able to introduce the continued learning or growth mindsets, and with all employees, so they're able to adapt themselves in a very proactive way. So it's kind of like companies provide the right kind of trainings, and also the employees also evolve themselves towards the new. Those are like two forces go together to help address that challenges.
Any other takers?
I would just add, I think what you said, Lili, was correct, and workers need to be upskilled, but that needs to be done in parallel with understanding how work design changes. I'll go back to my work design point again, but those to me always go hand in glove. How do we intelligently change work processes to benefit the business and to make the transition for people as well at the same time, so that it's a win for everybody. But yeah, technology is always changing work. And that kind of comes first. And so you have to, I've just seen organizations not understand the impact on the work. So the changes, they don't know what to do with the people exactly, because they don't understand how it's impacting work. So anyway, my point is that the work design and the people change, skill change has to happen together.
I'm going to ask your permission to get a little personal. Okay. What is he going to ask? You guys have all been through a tough 2 or 3 years. And in some cases, it's been good. In some cases, it's been bad. For the benefit of the people, the younger people in the audience and the students who might be watching this in the future, this recording, what is it that helped you get through this period? How did you maneuver the switches and the changes? And what do you attribute to your ability to successfully deal with it? The camera's on. You're being recorded. I understand.
I can give a very personal answer. I think it was having a growth mindset, because being in COVID, it was more of, this is going to be a sprint, and then it hit us, this is not a sprint, and I have 3 kids. So working remote schooling 3 kids, and managing, like, my husband and I, our jobs and everything, it was tough. So after the first few months, when they realized this is not going to be a sprint and this is going to be a new way of working, even after we moved past, and especially I've been supporting the hybrid program team, it was more of initially setting up the boundaries. Before any information comes broadly from, employers about what we can, what we cannot do, it's setting your own boundaries and understanding, how do I thrive at work? I'm a relationship person. I love seeing people in person. So as the moment I got the chance, I come to office a few days a week. But then I really love working from home the other days, where I save on the commute time, and I can get my laundry done in the morning in that commute time. So having that work-life balance, figuring out what worked best for me was the key. And I think I work in a company, and my managers and everybody around us have been amazing in terms of supporting work how you do best. The other thing is also the profession that I'm in. I have the luxury to be able to still be successful while working remote, versus some of the other people might be more. We have job classifications where they have to be in person, so they don't have the luxury. So at that time, then I think everyone has to rethink, is this the profession or the skill that I want to be in? If not, it's the perfect time to upskill, given the way how the technology is changing. Let's think about what is the profession I want to be in to get that flexibility. So I think for me, that was the biggest aha moment initially. Before I thought that I was going to get burnt out, I was like, I need to set my own boundaries between my kids' remote schooling and working.
And I agree with Maria. I think it was more mindset and looking at it as an opportunity. So we haven't, our entire team, many of our entire team was working remotely anyway, but we had those in-house, but we were used to being on the road traveling, and suddenly you're no longer traveling, and all of your delivery and all of the work has been face-to-face in person, and suddenly you have to make that shift. We looked at it as an opportunity to make the shift. And we ensured that we took care of the employees. We didn't lose any employees, and we made sure we didn't. We worked it out so that we wouldn't and couldn't, and dug in. We said once the first 2 weeks, and as Maria said, once we realized this was a thing and it's not just 2 weeks off, we just dug in, and so did the team. And so we all rallied around, and in fact, it probably made us closer as a team than we ever had been, because we all rallied around this cause to make it all work.
And I would just chime in, the conference board is a not-for-profit organization that's driven by memberships. And at the very beginning of COVID, there was a recession. It was really deep. Remember, I mentioned that unemployment was the highest it had been since the Great Depression for a very short while. So we had to work very hard here at the conference board to make sure that we were giving our members what they needed, so that this organization, which has been around for 116 years, wasn't going to disappear. So there was that sense of we all had the same purpose, the same goal, and we rallied around as well. I do think that the last few years have been really difficult in sum total, and I think that a lot of people have realized that perhaps something that they want something to change about their lives, and other people are more focused now on what it was they were doing, because that's really what they want to be doing. I think it gave some people time to think and reflect. So I think it's one last thing. All growth requires change, and change is hard. And so I think it's just important to remember that that sometimes when we're dealing with things that are painful, it's because we're growing.
I want to add something very personal, given that this is supposed to be a very personal questions. And during COVID, I was able to find my husband and get married. So just want to use that as an example. It means life's still going on, and no matter whatever the challenge, and we as a humans, and along with the organizations and working together, we're able to figure out what is the future would be, and in a ways, and go along with it.
One thing we did with our people, our team, was we did have, again, once we realized it was a thing, we all rallied around and looked at this opportunity, but we did have a conversation with them and said, we don't know where it's going. We don't know what the future looks like. Take a look at your own situation. And in fact, one of our employees really applauded our effort to do that. And she said she took a look at the mortgage, she took a look at insurance, she renegotiated some things, because we did want to be very open and upfront with them that you don't know what the future holds. And so we feel like we give them opportunity to develop, and they're all capable of taking off anytime. They would be great gifts to any organization. So we do what we can to keep them. But we knew at that time, while we were going to do everything we could to make it all work, we wanted to make sure that they were okay and that they took some ownership in their being okay as well. And they really appreciated that.
Words to live by. Take ownership of being okay. I like that. Catalina, I see you put your video on. Does that mean you wanted to say something?
I think that basically is and I agree there with Maria in the growth mindset. It's like being open to keep learning and adapting to new perspectives. Yeah.
Okay. We were asked by one of our participants to comment on brainstorming sessions for office workers when we're launching new products, marketing campaigns, solving critical problems, these kinds of things. Can that brainstorming process really work remotely? So I guess a way of saying that is, how do we get the creative juices flowing of a team to, in a remote setting? What ways have you learned or tried to get people to be more creative and in a remote setting? Howard, you had your hand up first. I don't know if you were calling time or what.
Yes, I have actually like a piggyback question for the previous discussion. I can start it later on. I think we can finish this question first. Thank you.
Okay, Maria, you're going to give us your insights on brainstorming in the creative process and remote team.
Totally. I think you'll see more coming out from Microsoft, because one of the research that we are working on is, when does it matter for people to be together in person? Because there are going to be moments where there isn't like hybrid is not, or remote is not the best substitute for. There are crucial moments where it is best to be together in person. Some of this you might see more coming in future, but when you think about brainstorming, I'm going to leave this with two things. As we were thinking through this process, some of the things that we started thinking through is, when people are together in person, there are a lot of pros for it. You feed off of each other's ideas, and a lot of other things can come up. But some of the cons are also, there are people of different personalities. There are introverts who are not very comfortable speaking in a bigger group and brainstorming, and some of those people really have a lot of brilliant ideas. When that is done virtually, they also get to give their inputs. So those are a lot of the things that we are currently studying on. So I don't have a concrete answer right now, but in the next month or so, you will definitely see something coming out from us in terms of what moments, when does it matter to be together in person?
Cool. Lili?
Yeah, I want to add some of the recent research we have done. It's exactly the same question. I would call it generally it's a myth, and people generally believe that for innovative type of tasks that you need to have, you will yield better results when you have everyone, coming together and meet in person. So we did a research for clients into like an AV context, means that, hey, there's a, like similar task, but giving people that the opportunities working together versus the remote. As what some of the Maria has mentioned is, we did not find significant, like the results did not say that when you have people meet in person, the results is significant better. So that was a very big aha moment for us. But with that said is, there are certain requirements or technology supports that we do provide for the virtual scenarios, means that you need to have the right kind of communication tools, the kind of the team norms, the good leadership supports, with those virtual contexts to ensure the success of the virtual innovation tasks to be to be successful in a way. So that was an interesting finding for that clients, with those innovation like myths that we typically have. It'll also give us more confidence towards, when you have the right kind of technology, equipment, as well as the right kind of team dynamic or team management, the results may not be, the innovation results may not be, may not be, undermines by the virtual kind of working context in a way. So that was the finding. With that said, is all the challenges will also be be the same level or even worse towards, do you have the right kind of leaders to lead these virtual teams? Do you set the right kind of working norms towards this kind of context, as well as some of the other, generally speaking, do you have the right kind of like cultures and ways of working to enable the innovative natures of work? So the challenge will still be the challenge. It's still tied back to the human nature, and when you interact and working with others. However, what we found out, the being together, not being together may not be the most critical drivers towards the decisions of whether this innovation will be successful or not.
If I might add to that, and I can't quote research, but I think you're right about that. I don't think it's going back. I think the future is more and more of this remote kind of activity. The technology is going to get better. I mean, think about when you're a hologram and you're a three-dimensional figure in a room with somebody else. I mean, this sort of stuff is going to happen. So I think that those who figure out first how to design the work, how to pick the leaders, how to do the work creatively and innovatively, they're going to be the winners. Because it's not going back. It's never going to be the same. My 2 cents anyway.
Howard, did you want to?
Yeah, so hearing a lot about different approach and different metrics has been used in different companies. I'm really interested about like the how those different metrics and approach can lead to like the employee engagement. For example, like for new employees, when they first join the company culture will be a big thing to like motivate the employee internally to really like put out the best efficiency in different of the job tasks. So with the remote working kind of new trend, so different company cultures cannot be passed along to the employees through like the really like when they're embedding in an office. So I'm pretty curious about like how different companies take on different tools, as Professor Square just mentioned. Like there's a lot of different tools and like different things that is available that can facilitate those different onboarding and different culture, like company culture spreading. So what are some tools that different companies taking, or different approach that companies taking to ensure the company culture was transferred to the new employees?
Culture. How does culture play in all this? Company culture.
I can share 2 examples, and maybe with some of the interesting comments that we observe from the client end. One of the examples, and you can thinking about, it's a new joiners app, means it's something that you can download to your phone. And even before you join the organizations and you download that as a candidate, it will give you a lot of introductions, including videos, including articles about what is this position, what is your teams, who are your colleagues, how you link them to LinkedIn's, and you can also schedule meetings with the dedicated potential team members, and towards on your first days, and how do you check the different checkpoints with your organizations, and who would be your mentors, and who you should schedule the first lunch with. And those kind of apps, it's a very becomes very handy for a lot of new joiners to organizations, and that is a great ways to embed the company's culture. And it's a vague terms, but if you convert culture in terms of behaviors and norms and the ways of working, and for example, some of the organizations has a very strong emphasis on safety as a culture. For the manufacturer organizations, on your day ones, and those new joiners will get hit, is you have to take this 10-hour trainings in 3 days on the safety and the safety norms. You have to pass it. If you don't pass it, you don't even start with your work. That give you strong signals about what this organization really care and emphasize on. So that's one example towards how we leverage technologies to ensure we emphasize on right kind of behaviors and the ways of working, the organization culture, to socialize that with new joiners. Another example is the recent trends, and then we collaborate with Metaverse is during the onboarding session, all the new joiners, they receive the Metaverse goggles in a ways, and they're able to join the Metaverse and meet your teammates in the Metaverse. So some of the good practice there, and it's definitely increased, particularly for technology organizations. They were like, wow, first thing I get is, high-tech piece. I'm able to play along. I'm able to meet the avatars of my boss. And so that definitely increased their alignments towards, the organizations moving forward on the technology edge aspect. But I will give a comment about one of the other clients try to do that, but try to do that in an online, in an in-person onboarding session. So they are sitting to each other, next to each other, but they were all wearing those goggles and meet each other in the Metaverse. That is quite interesting, is because why not just say hi to each other because you're next to me, and versus say hi to each other through Metaverse. But I want to use those two as an example. I think, Paul, you had a really good comments towards the technology is going forward. It will go forward whether we like it or not. As the organizations and as individual is more around that forward thinkings or the growth mindsets towards how we're able to best adapt and integrate those technology, enhancement towards, the business, towards the personal work life in a way. Is that helpful? Answer your question?
Definitely, thank you.
Well, we've run out of time. And I want to thank our guest speakers for their contribution, their knowledge, their wisdom, their understanding. And I'm going to pass it off to Hal, Professor Hal. I assume he's going to have some parting words for us before we go.
Thanks, Vince.
Okay, I also would like to thank all the presenters for the contribution to today's conference. I also want to thank the audience for participating in this event. Since there's no fee for the conference, please consider donating to support our crowdfunding related to this event by scanning the QR code given in the slide. The conference recording will be edited and made available at the given website on a later date. I want to thank you all again for your valuable time and contributions of the presenters and the audience participation.